Just for those persons who may be tuning in to us at this time, the resolution is, be it resolved that the Senate commends the Minister of Finance, the Honorable K. Peter Turnquest, Deputy Prime Minister, on the mid-year budget communication for the 6-month period ending the 31st of December 2017. And I believe Senator the Honorable Jenny Dotson had marked her spot. So if you stand, I'll recognize you. Senator the Honorable Jenny Dotson.
Good afternoon, Madam President, honorable senators, my family, friends, staff at the National Training Agency, faculty at the University of the Bahamas, and workers throughout the length and breadth of the Bahamas. I stand here today to address the 2017-2018 mid-year budget of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I again wish to thank God for allowing me to be placed in such a position at such a time as this. I again wish to thank the leader of the Free National Movement, the Honorable Hubert Alexander Minnis, for appointing me as one of the consultative senators and ensuring that labor, the most important commodity in our country, has a voice at this table. I also wish to thank all of you, senators, who have advised and guided me through this process as a newly appointed senator. Madam President, I wish to express my heartfelt condolences to the family of the late Joan Birch Hanna, who passed away on Good Friday, and of course my heartfelt condolences to her daughter, Margot Birch Blackwell, who is not only my friend but also my colleague at the University of the Bahamas, and I wish that her soul may rest in peace. I also wish to congratulate the Bahamas water polo team, who won all 3 divisional gold medals during the event in Jamaica. Of course, the Carifta swim team, who also won the championship later on in Jamaica. And of course, the Carifta track and field team, who finished second to Jamaica at the recent Carifta held here in the Bahamas. Madam President, as I reflect on the mid-year budget 2017-18, the importance of transparency and accountability in all facets of a budget process is critical. Also important to that process as a government is keeping the citizens informed of the finances of the country in simple terms that everyone can understand. It is important to do this and ensure that the citizenry buy into what is happening with the finances of the country, and even to provide advice to the government on these matters. There has been much discussion, Madam President, in the public domain about where the money has gone. Where did the money go? In my reading the Nassau Guardian, I noted an article dated April 5th, 2018, entitled, "Deputy Prime Minister Tells Davis Where the Money Went," and I wish to adopt the same. As has been clarified before and during the annual budget debate, the Parliament of the Bahamas approved a total borrowing authority of $1.4 billion. Of that amount, $323 million was to cover the current year's budgeted deficit. $400 million was to pay off the estimated unpaid bills inherited from the previous PLP administration, and the $750 million bond issuance was used primarily to roll over existing short-term debt obligations that was explained to Parliament before, and for which the details have been publicized publicly. These elements of public sector finance are unremarkable and are customary around the world. In addition to the borrowing of $323 million, the government sought permission by unanimous consent of the House, inclusive of opposition members who were all present, to borrow $400 million to settle unpaid bills from the former administration, which were identified up to the time of the budget presentation. It should be noted that subsequent to the passing of the budget, additional unpaid bills were identified that have been paid thus far from the current fiscal year's approved budget. meaning our deficit may have been even lower if we did not have to pay these unplanned expenses. President, the government received Parliament's approval to issue sovereign bonds in the amount of $750 million and did so in November 2017 to roll over existing maturity debt and to pay off short-term loans, including the central bank T-bills and extended overdraft amounts which carried higher interest rates. The government further requested and received unanimous House approval by resolution to borrow $100 million at the end of the mid-year budget statement debate last month to make good on a promissory note issued by the then PLP administration to the Bank of the Bahamas in relation to Resolve Bahamas Limited. Finally, the government requested via House resolution at the end of the mid-year budget statement debate permission to engage the Inter-American Development Bank, or the IDB, for a $90 million loan for Family Island airport development, labor infrastructure, and skills development and coastal management infrastructure. Madam President, this borrowing has not yet been finalized and will not likely be drawn down before the end of this fiscal year. This current F&M administration has now recorded 2 budget surpluses in the past 11 months, most recently in January of this year, and their aim is to arrive at the point of consistency in this regard, bringing down the deficit and eventually the massive debt accumulated under the PLP's watch. As I read these figures, I said ultimately Bahamians are not really concerned about the figures. And really, did they even listen to the explanation given by the Deputy Prime Minister of where the money went? What Bahamians want to see is for the economy to grow, to see more jobs and opportunities to be available for all Bahamians. The economy has already begun to rebound. Last year, it grew by 1.8%, and this year it is projected to grow at 2.5%. Madam President, the F&M was elected in May 2017, almost a year now. They won the election with a large majority and promised the people a fresh new day in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. All Bahamians want a better life for themselves, their children, their grandchildren, and future generations to come. What we have to realize, all of us around this table and in the lower house, is that we live in a digital age. Bahamians have access to what is happening in the world in a matter of seconds. They can research, surf, call, and get any information immediately. Therefore, they want a government that works for them rather than have its own selfish agenda. They want to see tangible growth and development rather than fabricated hopelessness and promises that can be kept. Therefore, they expect from their government tough and conclusive leadership, transparency and accountability, prudent management of their tax dollars, a growing economy that will support new job growth, rising wages rather than stagnant, Bahamian ownership opportunities, less taxes, a strong entrepreneurship backed by a robust business and regulatory environment, more education and training systems, and youth empowerment that will meet the needs of a digital economy and work of the future, access to affordable and quality health care, as well as basic safety and security. Madam President, the F&M set out its agenda in the 2017 manifesto, continuing its transformational socio-economic growth agenda for the 21st century, which focused on people being successful under the slogan, "It's the people's time," and hence the country will then be successful. Moving forward, the guidelines documented in that 2017 manifesto must be followed and adhered to. The government cannot just stand and tout its accomplishments in the past, but must truly now set new records that will surpass its past accomplishments. Madam President, further tax relief will be given to individuals and businesses through the elimination and reduction of import duties on a number of food and beverage products, including milk, yogurt, ice cream, bread, cakes, pastries, chips, salmon fillet, shrimps and prawns, pasta and pizza sauce, fruit drinks, canned or preserved vegetables, jams, fruit jellies and marmalades, and fruit or nut purees, mixtures of fruits and nuts, and soy sauce. There will also be an elimination or reduction of import duties on a number of personal care items and other personal products, as well as household items, including shampoo, hair products, soap, toilet tissue, shower heads, sunglasses, exercise and gym equipment, clothes hangers, shoe parts, water heater parts, sound and video equipment parts, microphones, massage apparatus, fans and air purifiers, toys, primary cell batteries, lead acid accumulator batteries, rodenticides and insecticides, and tires and inner tubes and paints. Also, there will be an elimination or reduction on import duties on a number of building materials, including sheets of veneers, wood flooring of various materials, wooden forms for concrete pouring, wooden posts and beams, asphalt shingles, durock and cement panel boards, and other cement panels and sheets. We will also see a reduction on the excise duty on electric motorcycles from 65% to 25%, providing a duty exemption on equipment and machinery specifically designed for ground repair, maintenance and service of cruise ships and sea vessels that conduct domestic and international travel. We'll also see a duty exemption on imported original artwork once approved under the conditions outlined by the National Arts Gallery. Madam President, recurrent expenditure next year is posted at a level of $2,676 million, which represents an increase of $218 million over the $2,458 million outrun for 2016-17. A significantly higher level of debt redemption of $125 million from $308 million to $433 million accounts for the share of the spending increase and is primarily explained by refinancing activities. Of the remaining rise of $93 million in recurrent expenditure, the following increases are noteworthy. $40 million to the Ministry of Health for the NHI Authority, $35 million for medical insurance premiums within the Ministry of Public Service and National Insurance, $16 million for pensions, $6 million for gratuities for those who retired, and $10.6 million for office rent, $5.6 million to cover the balance of overtime payments for the Royal Bahamas Police Force that was owing from the previous government. And overall, the budget includes a $27 million increase for persons engaged during the 2016-2017 fiscal year, $8 million for increments and $7.5 million to accommodate payments as per various industrial agreements with various public sector unions. As these other increases total some $155 million, it may be seen that in reality, the F&M has held the line on expenditure and are accommodating only the highest priority obligations. Madam President, capital expenditure in 2017-18 is projected at $230 million, down from the hurricane-impacted level of $310 million in 2016-2017, to represent 2.5% of the GDP, which is fully in line with historical trends. For its part, recurrent revenue for 2017-18 is projected to return post-hurricane to the trend ratio to GDP that has been targeted throughout the previous program of revenue reform, including VAT implementation. Accordingly, Madam President, with the somewhat more buoyant growth in the economy that is projected for both 2017 and 18, and including the fiscal impact of the revenue measures in this budget, Recurrent revenue is forecast at $2,150 million in the coming fiscal year, up to $190 million from the previous depressed year. On the basis of these projected fiscal developments, the GFS deficit in 2017-18 is targeted at $323 million, or 3.5% of the GDP. While, Madam President, that is a marked improvement from the estimated $500 million deficit recorded this year, it is still higher than the $310 million deficit posted in 2015-16. With an ongoing deficit of the magnitude projected for the upcoming year, the level of the government direct charge is forecast to reach $6.8 billion at the end of 2017-18, or a new all-time high of 72.7% of the GDP. Madam President, the government of the Bahamas must set the pace and standard for the public and private sector when it comes to being one of the largest employers in the country. We must learn that all human beings, including Bahamians, deserve to be treated with respect, common courtesy, and have the ability to sit to the table and negotiate a livable salary commensurate with the cost of living and taxes that must be paid. We must, as a country, become more people-orientated, more than process and procedure-orientated. The human resource element in this will include labor and people as resources of ideas. Through this, we will be able to determine what ideas people bring to the table, provide strength to those ideas and concepts, and also recognize where people are in their stage of life and what it is that they bring to the table based on which stage they are at. Resiliency is a goal that should extend to most of our interventions. For example, the casing of the shell of the conch is what keeps it safe. In order to get to the conch, the shell casing must be broken in two. The casing of the conch shell is the resiliency to protect it. The question is, what is the resiliency of our people? Is the resiliency our family? Is it our relationships, our education, our honesty, or is it just about being Bahamian? Whatever it is, it must be something that must sustain the Bahamian people's spirit and well-being. We want to create safety, well-being, and balance, a synergy of being a people who are resilient and can withstand anything that comes our way. People whose feet are on the ground and will not be toppled by some of the pressures of the world, such as the economic reality. What's happening in labor, sexual orientation, crime, etc. We must be encased and shielded from the storms, the pressures of life we face regionally and internationally, so that the waves will not move us. Madam President, it is in this vein that I wish to congratulate the Ministry of Labor for the initiative Labor on the Blocks, which has not only caused thousands of Bahamians to be hired, but it took the Ministry of Labor and employers out of their comfort zone, their offices, into the areas where the people are. They took the message personally to the people, dealt with them face to face, and did not allow the people to have any excuses in getting there and applying for jobs that are available. The government needs to encourage other ministries to embark and encourage more new initiatives like this so that we truly get out there and in the community. That way, people don't only see members of parliament or government officials during a crisis or during campaigns. I would also like to encourage all Bahamians to register with the Department of Labor Skills Bank so that the government is able to get an accurate account of how many skilled and unskilled workers are in the Bahamas, and to target more education and training towards those areas that are lacking and of the greatest need in our country. We all know the issue we have with the issuance of work permits, and as me and Senator Knowles was coming up Bay Street today, and we looked in some of the stores and we saw the amount of faces, foreign faces in those stores selling jewelry. And I said, how did they get a work permit? And I think I've raised the question with the Director of Labor and the Minister of Labor. And actually, when they apply for the work permit, they bring them in as persons to fix jewelry, saying that Bahamians can do it. But yet, they're in the stores selling jewelry, which our Bahamian people can do. That is something that we must look into. Madam President, the Department of Labor must be given more power in the conciliation process. The Industrial Tribunal must continue to work hard to get rid of the backlog of cases and to be able to deal with cases in a faster manner. Become more efficient. Madam President, despite the success of labor on the blocks, there are still too many issues in the workplace within the country. We have persons being fired without cause, such as what recently happened at Central Bank. Not only was the person an employee, but also a union officer. How can the Central Bank fire an employee of over 20 years without cause while they were put on mandatory vacation by the Central Bank? Exactly, but the Central Bank governor or whoever it was that made the decision knows that they will have to pay this person a lot of money based on the way it was done, but it seems as if we have no care or concern for what it is that we do and the fact that we will have to pay out all of this money by the way we terminated someone's services. Exactly, which causes more burden on us as taxpayers. Madam President, my professional work for the last 21 years has been at the University of the Bahamas. And one of the things as a faculty member and president of the UTEP, the faculty union, we have tried to create a process that has been fair and equitable to move the university to the 21st century. We now have a university whose charter was on November 2016. However, the Board of Trustees was not appointed until March 2018. In the meantime, everything we had counted on to do the work has been hampered and harmed by an autocratic, top-down decision-making that has harmed us. The nepotism in the university continues to grow. Despite the fact that the president's wife and friends were hired, the nepotism plot continues and thickens, as the Vice President of Human Resources' wife now has been hired as a clinical psychologist. This has raised many issues such as whether this person is actually licensed to practice in the Bahamas as a clinical psychologist. Do they even have a work permit? Because they would have been granted a spousal permit, not a work permit. And despite all of the clinical psychologists available in the Bahamas, how is it that we still hire a non-Bahamian? All of these persons hired by nepotism are making six-figure salaries, along with additional perks. But faculty and staff at the university continue to remain dormant at the same salary scales. Additionally, Madam President, the CEO of the institution has abdicated all of his responsibility to the provost, who has her tentacles in every facet of the university. Every I that is dotted, every T that is crossed must come across the provost's office before it's approved, down to something as basic as to who is allowed to teach or not, who gets an office, for example. And she is ably assisted by the retired but rehired Special Projects Director. This very autocratic leadership is killing the morale of the faculty and staff because the administration at the University of the Bahamas lack human resource skills and operate as a law unto themselves. Faculty thought that the international experience, Madam President, that some of our administration would have gotten would have changed their style of leadership. Sadly, this has not happened. Even in negotiations with UTEP and UB, we see this pervasive attitude being displayed by the lead negotiator, who is refusing to negotiate certain items in the industrial agreement because, according to them, they fall under the purview of the Academic Senate. Madam President, while it is true that the Academic Senate is to deal with academic matters, and it is their responsibility, structures, however, it is their job to deal with academic matters, but their responsibility, structure, etc.
Madam President, sorry. Would you please?
What are we yielding on here? What are we? I need you, Senator, to tell me what we're doing here.
I'm making a request for the member to yield, and she's yielded.
And
I think it must be made clear that the University of the Bahamas is statutorily an independent institution. And it is statutorily an independent institution, and while it is quite proper for an independent consultation senator to advance her union views, because it was on basis of her union activism that she was given this recognition, which we are very grateful she agreed to take. I would not be comfortable with any member in this Senate, while not calling names, basically identifying persons who are the subject of some complaint, and they're not here to defend themselves. Certainly, any transparent union dispute that the union of which you serve may have, that's not my concern. I'm deeply concerned about the allegation of nepotism made in such a way as to specifically identify people. And I would ask the member, please withdraw those comments. I think those are matters that can be taken up internally in that institution. And I would implore her to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. AG, and as so advised, I will withdraw those comments. And moving right along. The problem with the Academic Senate, as I was saying, and even though I know the AG said that statutorily the university is supposedly independent, however, taxpayers' dollars fund the university. So I think they're still accountable to the people of the Bahamas and the government of the Bahamas. And that is something that I think that we need to look at the Act and revise the University of the Bahamas Act, because too much power is given to some people in that Act. That is all I would say. While the university is in the process of forming the Academic Senate, no, Fred. I've said what I have to say. All right, you made the devil's advocate.
Senator, do not allow anybody to distract you at this point.
Thank you, Madam President.
Please proceed. Please proceed.
Furthermore, the university is just in the process of forming the Academic Senate, and whatever they do has to be approved by the Board of Trustees. So tell me, what is the issue? According to the persons leading the negotiation, it's management whom they represent, or should it be the University Board of Trustees that should be answerable to? This is the bigger issue being dealt with at the university, despite the many blatant violations of the industrial agreement. I would say to the new Board of Trustees, you have to dig deep and do an audit of the university, as there are many violations that will come to light very soon. I would say, do not be swayed by talks and trips, and do your due diligence to the country, institution, and the people who you work for, as you will be held accountable for your stewardship. These are just a few examples in the public and private sector of the very same anti-union sentiment that trade unionists see emerging more and more. Mr. Minister of Labor, that clause must be removed from our legislation that allows employers to terminate without cause. Madam President, I now turn to the very troubling ruling just handed down by the Court of Appeal in the Bahamas Industrial, Manufacturing and Allied Workers Union. Industrial grievances against Morton Salt have been dismissed as not tenable by the Court of Appeal. The Bahamas Industrial, Manufacturing and Allied Workers Union originally took the Inagua-based salt company to the Industrial Tribunal, and the appellate court, in a unanimous verdict, upheld the latter's ruling that the company had no case to answer. Acting Appeal Justice Sir Michael Barnett, in a ruling on February 28, 2018, ruling said that the union pounced on two issues relating to the 2002-2005 industrial agreement between the two parties. It challenged Morton Salt's adjustment of the work schedule for 29 maintenance technicians in July 2002 on the grounds this represented a unilateral variation of these workers' employment contracts and was therefore unenforceable. Also in 2008, the union queried overtime payments earned by its members when the industrial agreement was in force. It alleged that Morton Salt staff should be paid double time or twice the rate of pay if they were required to either work on Saturday or Sunday. Madam President, the union was in a trade dispute with Morton over a number of issues. Sir Michael recalled, however, the union and Morton agreed to submit only two issues to the tribunal for determination, namely the payment of overtime and the ability of Morton to unilaterally change the schedule of workers. The tribunal ruled in favor of the company on both matters, finding against the union that being the recognized bargaining agent for Morton Salt Line staff. The union, in its appeal, argued that the Employment Act, Section 10A, which stipulates that employees be paid twice their regular rate for working on public holidays or days off, meant that Morton Salt staff were entitled to this compensation if required to work at the weekend. It was the position of the union that where employees are scheduled to work on a 5-day work week, Monday through Friday, they are entitled to overtime pay equivalent to twice the rate of pay for any time they were required to work on either the Saturday or Sunday. Madam President, Sir Michael noted, the Industrial Tribunal, though, found that the double wage rate only applied to the 24 hours of consecutive rest identified as a day off in the definition section of the Employment Act, Section 9, a ruling the Court of Appeal agreed with. Under Section 10 of the Employment Act, double time is only required to be paid where an employee is required to work on a public holiday or a statutory day off under Section 9. Sir Michael wrote, if an employee is otherwise required to work over the standard hours, that employee is only entitled to be paid at the rate of 1.5 times his rate of pay. He added that this had also been cleared up in the Court of Appeal's recent ruling on a case brought by multiple Freeport container port employees, who had also argued that they were entitled to double time if they worked at any time during their 48 hours of rest. Madam President, Sir Michael said that the Morton Salt Union also sought to rely on the industrial agreement, which called for day and shift workers to be paid double time for working on Sunday. This, though, meant they were not entitled to such compensation for Saturday. Regarding the unilateral schedule change, Sir Michael said this was provided for in the industrial agreement. This is not tenable, he added, of the union's arguments. This provision expressly gives Morton the right to alter or extend existing shift arrangements. All Morton Salt was required to do was to consult with the union prior to implementing such a change. The tribunal has found that Morton did consult with the union, and that finding by the tribunal has not been challenged on this appeal. It was the view of the Court of Appeal judges that Article 32.3 in the Industrial Agreement clearly reserves to Morton this right to unilaterally alter or extend existing shift working arrangements. Article 4.8 does not in any way modify this contractual right given to Morton. In any event, there is no evidence that existing terms were better than the altered terms. The fact that they may be altered or modified does not without more make them less favorable than the terms that existed before the alteration. Madam President, for those reasons, Ground 2 was also rejected. The Court of Appeal rejected the union's claim that ministerial intervention was required before Morton Salt could change the standard hours of work from 8 to 12. Sir Michael went on to say an industrial agreement is a contract. It is an employment contract. The tribunal is entitled, nay obliged, to construe it in accordance with common law principles of contract law. The fact that it is given force by statute does not affect the way the tribunal must construe it. It is still an agreement. It is still a contract. Madam President, I too stand here today in this honorable place to call on the government of the Bahamas to join Mr. Ferguson, President of the Commonwealth Bahamas Trade Union Congress, in that appeal to the Privy Council in the interest of every worker in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. This decision, if not changed, will alter the very existence of collective bargaining agreements in the Bahamas. It will negate the provision of Section 51 of the Industrial Relations Act, which makes collective bargaining agreements binding on all companies if not changed. The ruling has to be tackled now. We cannot wait for legislative change. It must be changed at the highest court. In the words of O.B. Ferguson, President of the Commonwealth Bahamas Trade Union Congress, where do we go as a trade union movement? Who will represent workers? Let's get it together. Let's do what is right. We are regressing. The workers are going backwards. This very ruling goes against one of the main reasons why trade unions exist, to negotiate an industrial agreement for its members or bargaining unit. Is this ruling designed to get rid of trade unions? Is the question that many are asking. Madam President, in conclusion, I wish to urge the Prime Minister to meet with the President of the National Congress of Trade Unions Bahamas and the President of the Commonwealth Bahamas Trade Union Congress. They've been asking for a meeting with him, and they've asked me to say that publicly, that they're still waiting on a date to meet with the Prime Minister. We must get back to our Bahamian rituals. Huh? The farmers? Okay. We must get back to our Bahamian rituals that makes us who we are as a people. We must get back to a foundation rooted in spirituality, attaining quality education, because it takes an informed village with the same mindset to do this, and remembering the value of family, which is the village. Madam President, this village must have the same goals and see everyone in the village being successful, focusing on human growth and development, and developing relationships with ourselves, each other, and God. Through doing this, we won't lie, we won't cheat, we won't kill, we won't harm, we won't hurt our young people and harm our elders, for example. If each person or each Bahamian was able to find this synergy, we will have a better country and a better world. Each Bahamian will be a winner. Madam President, I stand to support the mid-year budget 2017-2018 and applaud the Deputy Prime Minister for a job well done. Thank you.
As many. Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Jay Dorset.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, it is my pleasure to rise in support of the resolution to commend the Deputy Prime Minister on the mid-year budget communication. Madam President.
Sorry, before you continue, distinguished Senator.
Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Carl Bethel.
Thank you. I think that I need to respond to a comment made about the Prime Minister. And I wish to say that if the union members or union leadership felt the need to approach one of our senators, that senator has the privilege, by virtue of her office, of being able to pick up the phone and call the Prime Minister to convey any such message as she would wish to convey. And if he couldn't take the call, he would certainly return the call to the senator. And so I think it is unfortunate that in a concluding comment, perhaps inadvertently, the senator may have towed water for someone which ought not really to be a part of a debate here, and ought not I would say, have been said in relationship to the Prime Minister. If she wishes to say something to the Prime Minister, there's a way to do it. As a senator, you have that right and privilege. And so I would hope that you'd reconsider that comment.
Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Jay Dorsett.
Thank you again, Madam President. Madam President, mid-year budget communications are relatively new in our practice of governance, but they serve a very useful purpose. They not only give the government an opportunity to gauge their performance to the mid-year point, and if necessary, make the necessary adjustments, but they offer a level of transparency in the performance and practice of governments, and they remind the Bahamian people of the government's priorities. This new FNM administration is now into its 10th month as the government of the Bahamas. And I firmly believe, Madam President, that based on its performance in the first 6 months, the government is on course. Just one short year ago, we were actively campaigning and appealing to the Bahamian people to give this group of new, young, energetic, and well-intentioned men and women, some of whom were brand new to politics, the opportunity to serve the country. We did so under the slogan, "It's the people's time," and we promised that we would be more responsive to the needs, the aspirations, and the general welfare of the people, more so than was shown by the administration that was in place at the time. The people listened and entrusted their future to us over the next 5 years. Madam President, we made some promises to the people, but we were careful not to promise pie in the sky, but rather to offer the people of the country hope for a new way of doing things that would work to their long-term benefit. I've heard it said that our promises were nothing but hot air. But I say that promises are only hot air when those who promise do not deliver on those promises. This government will deliver. So our promises will become action, will become reality. Madam President, apart from the specific, tangible things that this government promised, they also promised honesty and accountability in governance, transparency in our dealings. They promised a cadre of parliamentarians who were continually working on behalf of their constituents and keeping them informed on what government is doing on their behalf. They promised to organize, normalize, revitalize, and make the business of government more efficient and more responsive to the needs of the people. They promised to work towards sustainable development and the ongoing growth, development, and prosperity of the country. Madam President, this was not hot air. These are promises that we intend to keep. Madam President, all of the above are good, desirable, and attainable. But it cannot happen overnight. It will not happen overnight. The reality is that this administration did not find upon taking office that it had a blank slate on which to write. Thanks for the assist, Senator Mitchell. We are now discussing the mid-year budget performance. But let's not forget, Madam President, that this is not a budget that was crafted by this administration. This is a budget that was put in place by the outgoing administration, a budget which this administration, the FNM, had to, immediately upon taking office, had to study, tweak where it could, pass through Parliament, and thereafter manage it up to the mid-year point that we are discussing today. And going forward for the remainder of the fiscal year, when we would be in a position to put before the Bahamian people a budget for which we would be able to take full ownership, one which would truly reflect the FNM plans for moving the country forward. We are now looking at our management of the budget through the halfway point. And Madam President, we know that this administration faced many challenges up to the mid-year point in this budget. I do not have to go into details of missing funds and misappropriated funds in the various departments and ministries. Nor do I have to go into detail about outrageous contracts awarded to persons for work that could be done for less or for work that we have yet to see. And I do not have to go into details about the obscene number of persons who were pushed into the civil service, some of whom were placed there within days of the general election. In some instances, without any proper arrangement for how they were to be paid. And of course, Madam President, there were the millions of dollars in outstanding bills waiting to be paid, including monies due to our hardworking and essential civil servants. Madam President, we expect that there will be some carryover of debt and obligation from administration to administration, as was explained earlier by the government leader in this place. However, when we look at the whole picture, what this administration found was, to my mind, unprecedented to the point of being obscene. Madam President, these are the kinds of irresponsible actions and practices that hamstring new governments and throw their operations into chaos and disarray. And this is what the FNM met when it took office in May of last year. These, Madam President, are the kinds of practices that this FNM government has vowed to eliminate, to obliterate, and to forever put behind us in the governance of this country. These are the kinds of practices to which we say, never again. We will not allow the people's money to be wasted, misappropriated, squandered, and unaccounted for. Madam President, the FNM government should be commended for the way they managed this 2017-18 budget that we inherited. Based on the figures presented by the Ministry of Finance and laid out in the contributions of our various ministers, we are doing better than our predecessors were at this point last year, and certainly better than they were at this point in their governance after taking office. We heard that the economy grew by 1.8%, which may not seem much, but Madam President, the economy was not stagnant. It is stagnant. It is growing, and it is projected to continue to grow. Our GFS deficit shrunk by close to $100 million, and we repaid some $750 million in loans. And Madam President, as we look around, I can only speak for New Providence, we are able to observe other things that show promise. As mentioned, the island is much cleaner than it used to be, and we see the personnel from our roads and parks department constantly working and being very efficient in what they do. There has been a noticeable increased police presence on the streets, and we have seen increased vigilance in rooting out crime. As you have heard, our Small Enterprises Initiative is now beginning to bear fruit, and this augurs well for the young people of our country and for their ability to become entrepreneurs and to provide further employment. I also notice, Madam President, that there is now a lot of new construction springing up. Admittedly, these are not very large projects, but rather small starts of primarily individual homes and small commercial buildings. But it gives hope that things are indeed looking up. Madam President, we will continue with our legislative agenda, which will bring to reality some of the things we promised the Bahamian people, including much-needed land reform and the various pieces of legislation that will ensure that we are able to avoid blacklisting in the future. So, Madam President, I say that this government has made a very good start. We're not perfect, but we are prepared to acknowledge when we've made mistakes and to take corrective action. There are those who say that we should be further along than we are. There are those who complain that they have not seen this, they have not seen that which we promised, and therefore we are not doing what we set out to do. But Madam President, we are 10 months into our administration. 10 months. I maintain that we have done very well, and I would hold up our performance against that of any previous administration, especially the one immediately preceding us. Madam President, it is sometimes interesting to hear those opposite as they talk about what needs to be done and admonish this administration for not having done what they feel we ought to have done. And I think that takes a bit of nerve because they are asking us to address problems in 10 months that existed very obviously while they were in government over 5 years. And they are only now realizing that these things need to be dealt with. We said we would fix it, and we will fix it. We will. We never said we would do it in 9, 10 months. The only thing we can promise you in 10 months, you can deliver a baby in 9 months, but in 10 months, we have taken some corrective measures. We have kind of straightened up some things that we met there, and we will continue from there. We're laying a good foundation, Madam President, and we will continue to work for the people. And Madam President, I was quite amused to hear my Senate colleague on the other side give advice to this government as to what they ought to do. Nothing wrong with it, and some of it, Madam President, was good advice. But, Madam President, think of how different things might have been if she had, how different things might have been if she had given the same advice to her own party when they were in government and they had heeded it. We will take good advice wherever we get it. If it's good advice, I'm just saying, you know, all these great ideas, Madam President, and nobody heard it when they were there. We're happy to have it. And as long as it's good, we will take it. We will listen. I know you want us to forget that which is past. But there's a saying that if you forget your history, you'll repeat it. Something to that effect. We cannot forget because we want to make sure it's not repeated. And Madam President, we also heard about the polls, which showed that people were disappointed in our performance thus far. I don't agree with that. But Madam President, no, I don't agree that people are generally disappointed. I don't know who did the polls, but anyway, we've heard about them. And Madam President, we know polls are quite common now. And I recall some polls when those opposite were in charge, and they may not have started 6 months into their administration. But once they started, Madam President, they continued through the end, and they got progressively worse. And Madam President, I expect that polls will continue. They will be ongoing. But our work will also continue, Madam President. And it has started, and you know it has started. And we will continue. And at the end of the day, the poll that will matter will be the poll taken in about 4 years from now, when the Bahamian people will go to the polls and determine whether they want this government to continue on their behalf or whether they would prefer someone else at the helm. At the end of the day, Madam President, our performance will speak for us, and the Bahamian people will decide. And I firmly believe that this administration will face the Bahamian people with confidence, confident that we have done the best we could and that the people will be pleased with our performance. Madam President, I think it was President Obama of the United States that said, if you're walking down the right road and you're willing to keep walking, eventually you're going to make progress. Despite the challenges, despite the unreasonable demands, despite the doubters, despite those on the sidelines waiting for us to fail, Madam President, this government is walking down the right road, and we will continue to walk down the right road. And eventually, Madam President, and I believe it will be sooner rather than later, we will make the kind of progress that will cause the Bahamian people to place their welfare in our hands once again at the end of the term. Madam President, I congratulate the Deputy Prime Minister for the budget communication, and I congratulate this government for their performance thus far. And with that, Madam President, I support the...
As many. The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Michael Darville.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Minister. I'm praying for you. P-R-A-Y or P-R-E-Y? No. Seriously praying for him. He's a good man. Hard worker. We need all the prayers. Faced with many challenges. Thank you so much, Madam President. I trust that you and fellow senators had a peaceful and productive Easter holiday. Madam President, there's a true saying that time waits for no man. This phrase applies to the Free National Movement Administration, who around this same time last year had so much to say about what is wrong with the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And how only they can fix the problems for the people. Yet, just in about 30 days, this administration would have completed their first year in office and have demonstrated to the Bahamian people and the world that they have fallen short in all areas. And their style of governance lacked transparency and accountability. Madam President, the Bahamian people will never forget the fake news that deceived many during the political campaign leading up to the general election. Perhaps the best ones of all, that build a level of mistrust for our administration and subsequently affected us to the point where we lost the election. They said that the Progressive Liberal Party ministerial team stole the VAT money and were going to give residency to thousands of Chinese nationals. Both proved to be untrue. It is. Madam President, what's disturbing, though, is even though they had to backtrack on both of these statements immediately on coming to office, international organizations have indicated that despite the challenges we face as a nation, the Bahamas remain on the list of countries in the region where corruption is still relatively low. The Honorable Prime Minister continues to unjustify and unjustly label the PLP as corrupt. And worse, seems determined to paint a negative perception of our country to the world. This is sad, Madam President, because no other CARICOM leader would dare speak about his or her country in that way on any regional or international platform. This proves that our present Prime Minister is either dishonest or is inept, out of his league, and too deep to climb out of the hole. Madam President, the Free National Movement promised the Bahamian people many things during the political campaign, including transparency and accountability. You know, last night I was lying down, and when I went through this, I actually had to laugh to myself. And I always remember that actions speak louder than words. Yeah, it was a really big laugh to talk about transparency and accountability. Yeah, laugh out loud. That's it. That's laugh out loud. But my mother always taught me that action speaks louder than words. After assessing this administration actions in the last 10, almost 11 months, I have determined that they seem to put all efforts in wooing the Bahamian people, but now, when it's time to act on their behalf, And to serve those whose hearts and votes they won, they are unable to produce. A sad day in Jericho. Wow. Like many who have buyer's remorse are saying daily, the F&M administration only planned to win, but didn't plan to govern. Madam President, they said it's the people's time, and they intended to stomp out perceived corruption in all government ministries. However, all we have witnessed was a well-orchestrated witch hunt, utilizing their political operatives in high places, which ended up in naming and trying to shame political opponents without due process or solid factual information. These matters are before the court, so I leave it as that. Madam President, the side opposite promised to attract direct foreign investments to our shore, improve the ease of doing business, and yes, fix Grand Bahama. I could hear it ringing during the campaign. Fix it, fix it. My Lord. But in the last 11 months, the minister-led administration have proven to be unfit to lead this country and have gone from one political blunder to another. Madam President, in particular, they had such an interest in the people of Grand Bahama. Oh, we love the people of Grand Bahama. They do? Yeah. Well, then do something for them. Because the island of Grand Bahama is digressing. And as their own supporters echoed, your supporters are echoing on the streets. It is the worst Grand Bahama has ever been in the history of its conception. That's what your supporters are saying. Madam President, the lack of accountability and transparency continues. Yeah, but your supporters... And the F&M is beginning to believe its own political rhetoric. You're beginning to believe your own political
Honorable
rhetoric.
Senators,
the micro and macroeconomic science on the ground for Grand Bahama is showing that nothing tangible is happening as far as we can see. I'm hoping when you stand to your feet, you can unveil the plan. Madam President, I asked the Minister of State for Grand Bahama to tell us what is happening to Alukai. Why the tight lip? Tell us. What is happening with the large tech investments? When you went to Austin, Texas for this photo shoot, show me what's happening. Thank you very much. What's happening with the Carnival Cruise Port? Let us know. And what about all of the good news you had for the GIN project in Grand Bahama? Let us know. I want to. Why don't you keep it? You talk about accountability and transparency. Put it in the public domain. Thank you. Why are you waiting for this moment? Madam President, it was all talk, but no follow-through. Minister of State for Grand Bahama would try his best to paint a picture of the economy of Grand Bahama and the fact that it has turned the corner. But you can't sell that rhetoric to the business community, my brother. The unemployed and the thousands of Grand Bahamians who are now suffering and struggling to put food on the table for their families. Madam President, if you don't believe me, let's examine the facts about this government who is all about talk and no action. First, there was a 2017-2018 budget which brought tax breaks to the rich and absolutely nothing for the poor. Then the government shoved the commercial enterprise bill down the throats of the Bahamian people, which in the long run proved beneficial to the rich foreigner and disadvantaged some young entrepreneurs who are currently in the tech industry throughout this country. Yes, Madam President, the Bahamian people will never forget the opposition, no confidence vote in the Speaker in the House, who created an atmosphere of partiality which stemmed from the wrongful naming of the member for Angliston in the other place. Then, Madam President, there's the mass firing of some 2,500 government workers and the subsequent hiring of friends, family, and lovers and political operatives. The worst of all is the Bungle Omar deal and the signing of the heads of agreement which allows some 690 acres of crown land in East Grand Bahama, an environmentally sensitive area, to be given via lease agreement. The AG spoke about it today. Making matters worse, we are learning that the business plan for Oban seemed to be flawed, and there are questions of whether or not there's appropriate funding. Consequently, the investor received a heads of agreement which allowed them, and this is the part that really is affecting a lot of us in Grand Bahama, they have allowed them to go around the world shopping for finance. This is a policy that is tabooed in the Bahamas Investment Authority. Every investor must have a vested interest in the project. Madam President, this does not reflect well for the Minnis-led administration. The legislative framework governing the operation of the Bahamas Investment Authority was breached in this instance, and it is only right that the Bahamian people be informed on why the entire procedural process was compromised. President, this administration in action has not brought any major direct foreign investments to the table since coming to office. And the only major one thus far, beside the one that was in Harbor Island, is riddled with controversy. Madam President, during his bungled supposed explanation of the Oban deal, the Prime Minister seemed to have led a time release of a video that featured me, along with my permanent secretary, on the site visit for East Grand Bahama, with technical members from Oban Energies. During that tour of the site, just east of Statoil, I explained the entire team about the sensitivity of the ecosystem, the issue of possible groundwater contamination, and the fact that the proposed site was close to national parks. Madam President, like the former F&M administration, we opted to approve the project in principle, pending, and I repeat, pending a full EIA, a revised business plan, proof of funding for the mega project, full consultation with the residents of East Grand Bahama and other stakeholders that would possibly be affected by the project and its size. Prior, and I repeat, prior to the government signing a heads of agreement. This, of course, did not happen with this administration. And because they never came back with what we asked them for, the project remained dormant. Hence, Madam President, the video that they showed with me meeting the technical team from Oban Energy, me doing my job for the Ministry of Grand Bahama, is nothing more than smoke and mirrors. It was designed to distract from the truth of the matter. Nevertheless, as the video revealed, we did our due diligence as it relates to this project, and because we did our due diligence, we shelved the project prior to going into the general election. Something that this administration did not do for reasons that haven't been made clear to the Bahamian people. For this reason, Madam President, I question why all the Bahamas Investment Authority protocols were not followed. And why wasn't the Best Commission leading the charge from the onset? That is the agency that is supposed to be speaking from one technical team to the other, ensuring that the essential EIA was completed and assessed and vetted by them and possible international consultants prior to signing the heads of agreement. Sometimes with the Best Commission, we may not have the technical expertise in that organization, and so we do need to bring people from outside to assist us to look at the validity of an EIA and determine whether or not we should proceed with the project. Madam President, Sadly to say, someone at the BIA dropped the ball. And as a result of what has happened, the tail is now wagging the dog, and there is an unpleasant odor trailing behind the heads of agreement. But what is so disappointing is the fact that the government allowed representatives from Oban to go to East Grand Bahama to meet the people of East Grand Bahama. What an insult. Anytime you're dealing with a project that has technical validity, that can affect communities, government representatives must lead the charge. Not a foreign group coming into a community to explain a project. A slap in the face for the residents of East Grand Bahama. At that meeting, the residents learned from Oban representatives, not the government, that they are stuck with a deal of some 690 acres of Crown land, which was leased to the Oban energy groups for what we consider to be little or nothing. To make matters worse, there are residents in East Grand Bahama who claim that some of the proposed land is generation property, and there is this question of whether or not there's a heritage site on this proposed land. Madam President, in an attempt to mitigate some of the collateral damage to the Free National Movement and appease the constituency of East Grand Bahama, the Deputy Prime Minister, while in Freeport last week, said that despite the heads of agreement signed by Oban, the government would stop the project if all environmental concerns were not met by the developer. Again, the cart before the horse. Bad deal, try to clean up the bad deal. Admit that you dropped the ball, fix it, and say sorry to the Bahamian people. Stop blaming the PLP. But for all of us who read the heads of agreement, that is a legal binding document. All heads of agreements are legal binding documents. The big question to the government is, what would be the legal ramifications? And I was pleased that the AG, when he stood to his feet, after reviewing the document, seemed as if there's a possible way out, and he is the government's lawyer. This statement by the member for East Grand Bahama once again proved the case. Bad governance. I say it again, bad governance. Failure to govern and failure of governance 101. The fact that the minister-led administration is constantly pedaling backwards. You're not going forward. You sign a deal and you got to pedal back to fix it. You cannot be trusted. The Bahamian people has clearly determined that you're not to be trusted because you're not doing what you're supposed to do as a government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Madam President, the F&M has failed governance 101 and are still not ready for prime time. You need to go back to the drawing board. 2 weeks ago, Deputy Leader, the Honorable Chester Cooper, rightfully called for the resignation of the Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas for misleading the people of this country and members in the other place. The truth of the matter is that the Bahamas Investment Authority and the Best Commission fall under his portfolio, and all missteps must fall at his feet. That's how it goes. That's the way it works in governance. It's sad, but that's the way it goes. Madam President, this is a serious matter. And just admitting that there were missteps is not enough. The people of this country are demanding accountability and transparency concerning this issue. The question I ask, was the head of agreement vetted by the AG's office or the Attorney General himself prior to signing? Now, I spoke to the AG when he was on his feet while I was sitting, and I asked him to answer that question for me. Did you review?
This is not question time.
Let me say what I'm saying. Was the heads of agreement vetted by the AG's office, the government's attorney, or the Attorney General himself prior to signing the heads of agreement? That's what I want to know. That's what the people of Grand Bahama want to know. This morning, I listened to you very carefully. on the way out of this terrible deal. But you refuse to answer my question. Did you review the document prior to vetting, or you're reviewing the document now after the signing? Okay, well, I'm sorry. Well, I'm just saying. We on this side mirror our colleagues in the other place and are calling for the government to hold off on this bad deal. Hold off on the bad deal. We saw the deal was not making any sense, so we shelved it. You signed it, you find a way out, and you hold off on the deal. And conduct a full independent investigation. Not the EIA. The people of Grand Bahama want the EIA from the Oban Energy Group. We want an independent EIA into this matter to determine the viability of an oil refinery in Grand Bahama and to look closely at the potential negative effects it will have on the entire island. There's a lot of questions concerning this proposed project. Even the amount of jobs, it does not add up to current business trends around the world. Madam President, I have said it before, and I'll say it again. If the Free National Movement wanted to be truthful about the state of the economy, they would openly admit that much of the growth and development the Minister of Finance spoke about in the midterm budget communication was foreshadowed by the IMF in the 2017-2018 budget. Stop taking claim for work that has been done by the former administration. This new growth seen in the local economy is directly related. I want you to notice, and I want the Bahamian people to know this. This is directly related to the hard work of the former Christie-led administration and little or nothing to do with the Free National Movement efforts. Nothing. The only thing you can account to is the 2,500 workers, 500 workers who you let go from the public service. Nevertheless, the propaganda and the fake news from the Free National Movement continues. But thank God, there's a God above. And finally, the fake news is falling on deaf ear. In fact, Madam President, almost every project that is either in progress or has been announced thus far was left in the pipeline by the Christie administration. The truth of the matter is the majority of the real and tangible jobs created since May 2017 was because of projects left behind by our administration, like the Bahama deal, the Point deal. These projects and others were highly criticized by the Prime Minister and the F&M while in opposition. But today, it appears to be your only saving grace. Madam President, recently the Ministry of Labor announced a job fair for the MSC Ocean project. This is another major direct foreign investment project initiated by the Progressive Liberal Party that would add value to the tourism industry and create a new tourism destination as well as entrepreneurial and employment opportunities for residents in the Bimini area and Grand Bahama. That's the reason why we did it. We wanted to create job opportunities in areas that have been stagnant and give people, particularly the residents of Grand Bahama, the opportunity for employment that is not presently on our island. Nevertheless, while this administration was advertising these new jobs that will come on stream in short order, simultaneously, members were executing the largest mass firing in the history of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Madam President, ministers on the side opposite have no shame. Now, I love you, but you got no shame. And publicly indicated that through the mass firing exercise, the government saved some $75 million, yet the government returned to Parliament to borrow $90 million on the heels of borrowing $722 million, and then came back for another $750 million. With all this money being borrowed, why can't small contractors, lunch vendors, bus drivers get money owed to them on time? Why are the regular working people unable to get small amount of monies owed to them for work completed? Hey, listen here, pay the small man. Listen here, we paid them. We paid them when you all left it for us. We paid it when you left it for us. Listen here, we paid it while that's for us. You empower. Listen here, I can tell you why. Give me a minute. Let me tell you. Give me 1 second. Madam President.
Okay, senators. First of all, you're talking to me.
Thank you so much. But you know, my good friend.
So let's concentrate on what we're doing here today.
My good friend is trying to distract me.
As a senior senator, you will not be distracted.
No, I ain't gonna be distracted, but I want to confront him.
But you need,
And I want to confront
you
him.
must direct your
I wanna
comments
do it
to
through
me.
you. Yes,
You must
ma'am.
direct your comments to me,
Madam
please.
President, what is happening is unacceptable. I am focused. It's unacceptable, it's sad, and it confirmed what we knew all along. These members on this side opposite is still not ready to govern. Madam President, less than a month ago, less than a month, we will be right back here in this honorable place debating the 2018-2019 budget communication. And the country is once again on pins and needles, all of us, waiting to see what this inexperienced, incompetent F&M administration plan for the next fiscal year, or worse. Lord, no man, it's not me, right?
Senator, just continue, please.
Borrowed. We on Grand Bahama remain hopeful. It is so bad on Grand Bahama, Madam President, that since Hurricane Matthew, some people are homeless. And in some pockets of our community, families are literally starving and in need of immediate food assistance. Minister, you need to listen to this. This is a serious note. The Ministry of Social Services tried. They are grossly underfunded, and people are constantly going to them, cannot get assistance. Therefore, I'm calling on the government to put emergency funding in place to the Department of Social Service to assist the hundreds of Grand Bahamians struggling to put food on the table for their families. A few weeks ago, we learned about the problems with children going to school without breakfast and making it very difficult for them to learn. While, hey, I'm telling you, I'm getting my, oh, that's happening. It's happening, but you need to fix it, my brother. I tried when I was there. While others cannot qualify for the underfunded school lunch program. I would never forget the criticisms I got from you, Minister, and the Minister of Finance, while in opposition for non-payment of school vendors. But watching the Free National Movement in operation, the payment history is 100 times worse. This proved once again that you're all about talk and no action. You see, it's easy to talk about it when you're on this side opposite. When you get there, you need to find the money to do it. Through you, Madam President, permit me to beg the Minister of Finance. I'm going to beg him, through you. I'm literally going to beg him. Please pay the lunch vendors throughout the country. Pay them, man. I beg you to pay them. It's embarrassing because this program helps underprivileged children by giving them the only hot meal, some of them the only hot meal they get the entire day. Pay the lunch vendors in Grand Bahama and throughout the country. What is worse, Madam President, we're hearing that the current Minister of Education is contemplating stopping the lunch program. Madam President, I hope this is not true. I heard it through the grapevine. Information that's coming back from the constituencies confirmed. I said I heard it, man.
No, but that's not true.
Yeah, well, that's fine. I'm moving on.
Yeah, but that's not true.
I'm moving on.
Yeah.
Hold
I hope
on.
It's not true.
Senators,
Yeah.
please.
Information coming back from the various constituencies confirmed that the school lunch program need to be expanded, Minister. Yes. Particularly on the island of Grand Bahama, where there's a great need for food for our children. Madam President, as the former minister for Grand Bahama, I have been an advocate for low-interest loans and grant funding for entrepreneurs and small and medium-sized businesses, particularly in East and West Grand Bahama, and particularly in the Family Island communities, where mom-and-pop shops lost almost everything in the aftermath of Hurricane Joaquin and Matthew. Madam President, for the last 11 months, I have been crying to the government to unveil its economic relief plan for the island of Grand Bahama. The people of Grand Bahama are waiting now impatiently for this mysterious template for the master strategic plan designed for Grand Bahama as outlined on page 8 in the speech from the throne. I heard it downstairs, and I've heard no more. Madam President, after borrowing $1.7 million, the Minister of Finance openly admitted, wholeheartedly, $1.7 billion, excuse me, the Minister of Finance openly admitted that he had to pull back on some of the capital works funding, and what that did for Grand Bahama was slow down the needed projects and stifle progress. This type of governance is unacceptable, and Madam President, I've said it time and time again, that the Bahamas and Grand Bahama is the industrial capital of the Bahamas, and I support industry for the island of Grand Bahama. However, it must be done in an environmentally sustainable way, and the ecosystems throughout our island, particularly East Grand Bahama, which is very sensitive, holds some of the largest freshwater supplies in this country, a precious natural resource that supplies water to the entire island of Grand Bahama for consumption. Madam President, I am fast running out of time, but I would like to say that the Minister of Health a couple of weeks ago spoke specifically about a forensic audit of the PHA to look at all contracts awarded under the Progressive Liberal Party. What I would like to say is that these contracts were awarded as part of the National Health Insurance Scheme, and we worked very closely, we worked very closely with the representatives from KPMG to ensure that proper protocols were put in place before we executed our strategic plan. Madam President, in December 2016, a comprehensive report was reported to our administration by KPMG, the consultants engaged to assist us with the launch of universal health care in our country by way of National Health Insurance Plan. In that report, they identified 43 of the 90 clinics throughout our archipelago which were in need of urgent attention. 17 of those clinics were considered high priority and in need of immediate attention because they possibly could not pass the licensing requirement. In this regard, after careful review, Madam President, we engaged the external quantity surveyor to analyze the costs of the deficiencies identified so that the Cabinet of the Bahamas might have a clear understanding of the issues and costs associated with a very urgent initiative on behalf of the Bahamian people. We also knew that the report and our assessment that many of these clinics were below licensing and registration requirement by the National Health Insurance Authority and Health Facilities Board. Madam President, no one in or outside of this place would disagree that there's a need for a complete transformation of our public health care system. In fact, Madam President, it is exactly why our administration launched an aggressive healthcare system strengthening program, beginning with the ultimate removal of silos in our tertiary, secondary, and primary healthcare delivery systems, which hindered the full impact of service delivered by our healthcare professionals and prevented Bahamians from accessing the service. Madam President, we started what was regarded by some in the region as a model to follow. We utilized the technical management capacity of the PHA, the hard-working, talented staff from the Department of Public Health, to oversee a cabinet subcommittee to ensure that infrastructure upgrades were necessary, and NHI would definitely be launched by way of universal primary health care for all Bahamians. Ultimately, Madam President, this was the prelude to our administration objective to introduce single governance structure for our public health care system so as to maximize scarce resources and create equity which would benefit all who seek quality health care in our public system from Inagua to Grand Key. Madam President, we did not blame the former administration for the incomplete mini hospitals in Abaco and Exuma, which we found that there were much deficiencies in the design and size and safety issues in the extent that it could not be used by the residents in those communities. Today, Madam President, thanks to the dedicated men and women in the PHA and the Department of Public Health, the clinics in Abaco, West End, Exuma are now open and operational. There's a lot more work to be done. We looked at the models, and you know what's amazing? I saw the Prime Minister in San Salvador speaking about the clinic in San Salvador as if the clinic is not good enough for the people of San Salvador. Then the Minister of Health come behind saying he ain't gonna open the clinic because he don't have the staff. The reality is the Abaco clinic and the Exuma clinic, when we looked at the data that came back to us, there's also the question that we can put a question mark on those two clinics. The reality is the people in those communities deserve those clinics, and the direct foreign investment protocols that were put in place for expansion of direct foreign investment in Cat Island, San Salvador, Abaco, as well as Exuma, we believe that this infrastructure was absolutely necessary. We did the same thing for the clinic in West End. Because of the GIN project, we realized that the West End clinic was inappropriate for the community and did not reflect the requirements necessary for the expansion of the GIN project. That is the reason why we invested money in that clinic, to ensure that individuals, foreign and both Bahamians, have access to quality health care in a proper infrastructure that is safe and definitely meets the international requirements and the requirements that were laid down by NHI. Madam President, following our assessment and based on the implications of what thousands of Bahamians told us they need, aggressive timeline was completed in order for us to upgrade these clinics. Madam President, the urgent repair were necessary, and all scope of works had to be assessed by a quantity surveyor to determine the order of magnitude of the budgets. The contractors must have satisfied the government's compliance requirement, inclusive of business license, VAT compliance, and VAT registration. The contract sum had to be no greater than that what the quantity surveyor put in place. The direct Public Hospitals Authority agency monitored the project, and the form of the contract was to be in a standard form that met the necessary requirement for the government. Finally, Madam President, since the Minister of Health did not give credit to the work that he met in place, I would wish to highlight and express my profound gratitude to the former government on the hard work that has been put in place in order for us to have the upgrades to the 17 clinics that we needed. Madam President, it's important to understand, because the minister clearly indicated that he's challenging the cabinet conclusion, which gave the PHA the authority to act as the machinery necessary for these upgrades. I'd like to say that the PHA, the funds that was put into the PHA was not a part of the PHA's budget. It was a part of the funding for NHI. The PHA was only the vehicle that was utilized. Well, between me and you scuttled the NHI program, not us. We had a way how we were going to do it. It's up for you to make the determination the way you got. You holding the baton, not the PLP. But the Bahamian people are demanding the implementation of NHI to ensure that Bahamians throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas have equity in the system and can access these essential services from Inago all the way to Grand Cape. Madam President, as I close, thank you very much. Hey, listen, your dreams become reality. It first starts here, and then it happens. We in the Progressive Liberal Party put in place a system for the launch of NHI. We are waiting patiently on the Free National Movement to articulate to the Bahamian people what your plans are for NHI. It's been 1 year. $40 million was allocated in the budget. The 270 and 218, it was allocated in the budget. The reality is, where did that money go, and where is NHI as we speak? Madam President,
I'm not opposed to anything.
with all the delays, the Bahamian people are becoming frustrated.
Yes. Well, that is economical.
The government
No. You're trying to use taxes to force people to change the way they buy food.
The government has failed Grand Bahama. The government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas have failed to govern. The government of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas fired thousands of government workers who trusted them. They have failed to operate within the rules. For the last year, they have blamed the PLP for everything. They have lost credibility in the eyes of the Bahamian people, and they have failed Grand Bahama miserably. Madam President, the F&M was not ready to govern. And all over this country, both PLP and F&M is saying that this minister-led administration have fumbled the ball. A work that they claim they had the capability and the wherewithal to accomplish on day one of governance. A word to the wise is sufficient. The people of this country is saying to the Free National Movement, you better straighten up or fly right. Thank you, Madam.
As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Kwesi Thompson.
You help me? That's it, man. Hey, listen here. We love Grand Bahama, man. We got the same passion for Grand Bahama.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And Madam President, I am again pleased to be here to be able to represent the people of Grand Bahama and to be able to speak at this midterm budget communication. Madam President, I intend to answer the questions that were posed by both Senator Darville and also Senator Jobert Colby. And, you know, Madam President, before I get into the specific of answering these questions, which are in my presentation, you know, it is very easy, I believe, to speak from the side that they are sitting. But there is, and it's very easy and I accept the passion that Senator Darville speaks, and I accept the passion that Senator Colby speaks. I think Senator Darville, like myself, are Grand Bahamians and can see firsthand and Senator Colby also from Grand Bahama, but I see both of us have that same passion for Grand Bahama. But unfortunately, there are times when and people in Grand Bahama see this, and I believe that they are, I know that they are smart enough to know the difference between political rhetoric and when a government is doing all that it can to resolve their problems in Grand Bahama. And Madam President, you know, just one statement that I'll make even before I get into this. The Prime Minister himself had determined, and I commend the Prime Minister for this, had determined that Grand Bahama, two statements the Prime Minister made, or two things he did that was very significant for Grand Bahama. One is to make the statement, because people have often forgotten Grand Bahama and have often put Grand Bahama on the second burner. But the Prime Minister has made the fundamental statement that in order for the Bahamas to move forward and for the Bahamas to increase and for the Bahamas to do better, Grand Bahama must do better. And that is a significant statement that a Prime Minister has made. And secondly, he has dedicated a specific time in office in Grand Bahama, where he has dedicated a day of the month, where he has left everything else in the country to travel to be in his office in Grand Bahama, to focus 100% on the issues that are facing Grand Bahamians. What other, I mean, the most focus that a prime minister who has come out of the office of New Providence and is sitting in the office in Grand Bahama to specifically address the needs of the people in Grand Bahama, that is absolute dedication. So, Madam President, thank you very much. It is indeed a pleasure to contribute to this midterm budget communication. And I have quite a bit to get through, so I want to make sure that we get through it. And to relay the plans and ongoing initiatives in the Office of the Prime Minister.
Senators, I would ask you to tone it down a bit, please. We do have someone on the floor.
That are projected, Madam President, to continue to progress, in Grand Bahama. Madam President, Senator JoBeth Colby spoke about the Colby Davis. Sorry, I don't want to take that last name from you. That's a very important last name. Spoke about the economy and says that we have fumbled the bag. I think that was her comment. But Madam President, I referred to the staff concluding statement of 2018 of the IMF. And I refer to it really with cautious optimism, because they don't want to talk about this and they don't want to see this. But we can talk about it. The statement opening sentence is that the Bahamas economy has turned the corner, but significant challenges remain. It is significant, Madam President, to note that the real GDP is estimated to have expanded by 1.8% in 2017, supported by the completion of Bahama, new foreign direct investment, and post-hurricane construction activity. The national accounts have been substantially revised, mainly due to improved coverage, resulting in a 27% increase in the level of nominal GDP. Madam President, it is significant and a drastic turnaround that the IMF noted. The fiscal balance is improving on the back of lower spending. So Madam President, this has absolutely nothing to do with the former government. See, they would like to have it both ways. They would like to say all of the positive things that are happening in the economy is as a result of things they left in place. But all of the bad things that may be happening is as a result of the FNM. It makes absolutely no sense. No sense.
But it's true. It don't make sense, but it's true.
Either they can say what happened in the last 10 months or 11 months is as a result of the FNM, or what happened in the last 10 months or 11 months is as a result of the PLP. You can't have it both ways.
What it is it FNM?
Madam President, this is what they said. This is this is my statement. This is very significant. As the economy would have grown from a minus 3.1 in 2015 under the PLP to grow to an estimated 2.5% in 2018 by the FNM, which by my calculations is actually a 5% growth. The IMF statement is consistent with the central bank's quarterly economic review released in December of 2017, which stated that the domestic economy's mildly positive growth trajectory was sustained during the fourth quarter of 2017. They ain't talking about 2016. They're talking about the fourth quarter of 2017. Central bank further stated that as a consequence, labor market conditions continued to gradually improve. Madam President, there are other key indicators of improvement to note as well. In tourism, particularly in Grand Bahama, where the tourism sector took a huge blow after Hurricane Matthew. The central bank states, and this is what the central bank states as a result of compiling their information. And I quote, Grand Bahama showed signs of modest improvement following the severe hurricane-related setback of the prior year. Reflecting this turnaround, total arrivals advanced by 13.6% to 0.1 million, in contrast to the 53.1 plunge in the previous year, as the air and sea components grew by 13.9 and 13.5 respectively. Madam President, the point is this. Things are improving in Grand Bahama. These are the numbers, the facts. Madam President, the people of Grand Bahama, I believe, should be very pleased with the turnaround in the tourism numbers. I recognize that we are certainly, and no one should be under any illusions, I recognize that we are certainly not at all where we want to be. But at least in the last quarter of 2017, we improved and the numbers are moving in the right direction. Madam President, the central bank report also referred to construction in the overall, in the country overall, and states that the construction sector output benefited from a number of varied scale foreign investment projects, and to the lesser extent post-hurricane building work. Further, the domestic private sector activity showed signs of modest improvement after a sluggish performance for almost a decade. So, Madam President, what the central bank is saying is it supports what the IMF spoke about, that we are improving. Now, Madam President, without a doubt, we're not where we need to be. In fact, after 11 months, no one should believe or be under any illusions that in 11 months we are going to be where we need to be. But, Madam President, what is important is that we are better off than we were last year. Madam President, the report also gave good news for the last quarter of last year. As an indicator of domestic activity, total mortgage disbursements for new construction and repairs, as reported by commercial banks, insurance companies, and the Bahamas Mortgage Corporation, grew by 43.3% to 28.9%. I thought this was significant because what it means is that we have increased in mortgage activity. And if we've increased in mortgage activity, that means that there are more people who are buying houses or more people who are building houses. And if there are more people who are building houses, that means there are more persons who are working in the construction industry. See, they don't want to speak to the facts. They don't want to speak to the numbers that are in these reports, which indicate that we are better off now than we were last year. The domestic residential component rose by 38.9% to 27.8 million, in contrast to a 35.5 decline in 2016. There's been almost a complete turnaround with respect to residential mortgages and residential construction. There was a decrease in 2016 by 38.9%. There's been an increase in 2017 by 35.5%, almost a complete turnaround. Madam President, saw improvements in unemployment numbers as well, particularly in Grand Bahama. Jobless rate in Grand Bahama fell by 30 base points to 12.1%. Now, I accept, Madam President, that this is still unfortunately higher than it is in New Providence. It's higher than it is in Abaco and higher than the overall percentage in the Bahamas. And we must work to fix that problem. However, for the 12 months to November, the unemployment rates were lower for all of the major markets, with rates in New Providence, Grand Bahama, and Abaco declining by 2.3%, 1.2%, and 0.5 percentage points respectively. What does that mean? That means for the last year, unemployment numbers have gone down for the entire Bahamas. Madam President, The Prime Minister noted the following in his midterm budget remarks, and I quote his midterm budget remarks. The results of the most recent labor force survey of the Department of Statistics for Grand Bahama from May of 2017 to November of 2017 does indicate some progress. We saw in Grand Bahama a slight decrease in unemployment from 12.4 to 12.1. There are still too many unemployed, but the rate is trending in the right direction. It should be noted that there was a significant increase in employed individuals in Grand Bahama. The number of people employed in May of 2017 in Grand Bahama was 26,160 persons. That's the number that were employed in May 2017. And the number increased to 27,240 in November of 2017. This was an increase of almost 1,000 people. In fact, it was over 1,000. It amounted to an increase of 1,080 people, which means, Madam President, and I'm not trying to spin the numbers. I'm not trying to interpret the numbers in any particular fashion, but it means that in May of 2017 to November of 2017, there was an increase of employed persons to the tune of 1,080 people. So, Madam President, those are the numbers. Now, do we say that we are satisfied by those numbers? Absolutely not. Do we say that we finished the work that we have started? Absolutely not. The only thing this does is it tells us that if we continue on the path that we have started, if we continue the hard work that we have started, then we will reach the destination of where we want to go. It motivates us to let us know that the work that we have been doing and the work that we have been putting in has resulted in progress. No, we're not at all, and I'll be clear, we are not at all where we need to be. But I am thankful that we are not where we used to be. Madam President, upon taking office, this government committed to stimulating the local business environment in Grand Bahama, because a healthy and strong Grand Bahama economy is vital to the growth and development of the entire Bahamas. One of the important initiatives has been improving the ease of doing business in Grand Bahama with the aim of stimulating private sector growth. The creation of our investment unit is progressing, and our office has begun regular business processing meetings with the Grand Bahama Port Authority. In these meetings, we will be discussing all outstanding matters for approval to ensure the government and the Port Authority work together in the approval process with a view to taking care of our investors. This is the beginning stage, but we believe that these meetings will be fruitful and lead to the eventual one-stop shop. It is also important to advise the public on a number of projects which are at various stages, because this was asked by both senators. So we are answering, and as they have called me to be transparent and to give them the information, then that's what we will do. It is important to advise the public on a number of projects which are at various stages, which have and should continue to improve our economy. Several large-scale investment projects are presently underway for Grand Bahama. Perhaps one of the most important and anticipated is the impending Grand Lucayan deal. Which is expected to restore activity to the entire Lucayan Strip, attracting an influx of visitors to the island and bringing business to the Port Lucayan marketplace. We are taking advantage of this opportunity with the Lucayan Strip, and while the hotel must be redeveloped urgently, we are seeking to create the right destination for Grand Bahama. Putting the right pieces together is not an easy job, as I'm sure the minister, the former minister for Grand Bahama will say. This includes airlift, cruise vessels, tours, activities, dealing with the cost of electricity, consumables, and taxes. Because I'm sure, looking at the records, he had to deal with the same issues that we are dealing with today. It is a careful balancing act. Included in this project development is also a recognizable major brand coming to Grand Bahama, which creates that unique and distinct destination. Madam President, this matter has taken some time for a number of reasons, including when we came to office, the parties had not agreed and were nowhere close to agreeing the operators for the hotel. It therefore took some time to determine who the potential operators would be. Second, the financial demands of the operators were not acceptable at that time to the government, which led the government to make an offer to actually purchase the hotel themselves. Third, it was after the government made this offer that the developer, Paul Wynn, returned with an offer which was acceptable to Hutchison and led to the signing of the letter of intent in late December and came into effect in January. Since January, the government has been engaged with all parties in negotiating an acceptable heads of agreement. The Grand Lucayan is not an easy project and requires special attention to who will operate the hotel, proper and adequate airlift, protection of Bahamian employment during renovations and operation, and what concessions are needed to keep the operation viable. We are confident that we are at the end of this process and will soon see the renovations and the reopening of the entire resort. Madam President, the reopening of Grand Lucayan property is in perfect alignment with the agreement signed this past November with Bahamas Paradise Cruise Line to bring the grand celebration back to Grand Bahama and add a newly acquired sister ship in which will actually be arriving this Saturday, 14th of April. And Madam President, they continue to say that nothing is happening in Grand Bahama, but Madam President, this is happening in Grand Bahama. The SS Neoclassical will be deployed and sailed between the port of Palm Beach and Grand Bahama Island 3 times per week. What this means, Madam President, is every day there will be a ship that will be coming to Grand Bahama, bringing visitors and bringing, more importantly, stopover visitors, heads in beds every single day for Grand Bahama. Madam President, I extend regards to the Bahamas Paradise Cruise Line team for their provision of an enjoyable, cost-effective avenue for Grand Bahamians to travel to Florida. It is excellent for tourists visiting Grand Bahama, as it allows you to travel, explore the island, coming off the ship to overnight at our hotels, participate in tours and excursions, and do the like. It is now expected, Madam President, that via both deployed ships, and I want to say this, via both deployed ships, the Bahamas Paradise Cruise Line will be able to deliver, and this is their estimate, that they will be able to deliver some 400,000 passengers to Grand Bahama each year. The Bahamas Paradise Cruise also estimates that with both vessels, Grand Bahama will see an increase in the spend on shore excursions to an estimated $5 million per year, and a total passenger spend on the island to an estimated $19 million per year. Madam President, this is excellent news for Grand Bahama. We also negotiated, Madam President, an airlift agreement with Sunwing, and now have the return of Vacation Express. It has been announced that a total of 8 non-stop flights departing from various U.S. cities will begin their flight schedules next month, May of 2018. Flights, Madam President, will be coming from Detroit, from Chicago, Nashville, Pittsburgh, Newark, Baltimore, Cincinnati, and Dallas. That will be, Madam President, an addition of air passengers, an addition of 16,800 passengers coming from air. So, Madam President, we continue to engage owners, and you know, it's always that, you know, when it's positive, it's as a result of what the former government has done. Madam President, we continue to engage owners in the iconic properties of the Royal Oasis Hotel and Xanadu Beach Hotel. Both are on the market for sale and have had some interest. However, it is way too early for us to make any public comment on those. Madam President, I am particularly enthused about the ongoing development in eastern and western ends of the island. And they asked also, Madam President, for us to speak about the other developments that's going on. So I'm happy, Madam President, to be able to speak about those. One notable development being the Seaward Fishing Village, which upon completion will comprise a series of village-style homes on marina front lots in Deadman's Reef, Madam President. The developers in this multi-million-dollar project have already begun to engage local Bahamian contractors and have committed to purchasing many of their items locally, Madam President. We also similarly have the Blue Marlin Cove Resort has announced plans actually to do a major expansion at the end of this year. The sport fishing heritage in West End will expand into second home, world-class vacation, and an ecotourism destination. Also, Madam President, the government is presently in discussions with the investment group Grand Palm Acquisitions Limited regarding the $2.5 billion deal to revitalize what was the much-anticipated GIN project in West End. The Grand Palm Beach acquisition proposes to construct, repair, revitalize, and develop and operate a 246-room in 3 hotels, banquet facility, 116 branded hotel residents, 1,000 other residents, a hotel casino site, and approximately 150,000 square feet of shops. Madam President, they also have informed us that once all of the matters have been completed with respect to the heads of agreement and all of the other approvals have been granted, we are informed that the first year the developers intend to hire approximately 200 people. Madam President, also this year, we have seen other significant developments as well. So we've seen the Omni Financial Group has opened 2 new locations in Grand Bahama and hired approximately 10 persons. We are pleased that this expansion will allow the Omni Financial to continue to provide the services of money transfers and payday loans that Grand Bahamians have come to rely on. We also have seen the Wind River Tobacco Manufacturing Company has recently commenced its operations of manufacturing tobaccos for export. They have recently hired 16 employees. Grand Bahama, Madam President, has also seen the recent opening of Falco Marine and Logistics Management. This is a $1.4 million investment, is a 100% Bahamian-owned investment. Madam President, Falco has already notably employed 16 Bahamians and will provide services to the Grand Bahama community, including customs brokerage, port agency, husbandry, dry dock logistics, and facilitating of special projects. I wanted to just take the time out to commend the owners of Falco, because in addition to these services, one of the company's major goals is to develop and facilitate a training model and institute that will allow Bahamians to engage in certified training and decrease the skills gap that currently exists in the industry, particularly at the Grand Bahama Shipyard. This is what is happening today in Grand Bahama. In addition, Pharmachem Technologies, Grand Bahama Limited, is presently undergoing an expansion. This is a $180 million expansion. Since the commencement of this project, Pharmachem has engaged 5 major local contractors, creating temporary employment of up to 180. The corporation also has purchased projects related materials, supplies, and services from 62 local vendors and suppliers. This is happening in Grand Bahama. Madam President, there's been the expansion also of the Pirates Cove zip line and water park, which was recently opened by the Prime Minister. It is a $1.4 million investment, and it has been expanded, and the expansion was opened by this Prime Minister. Madam President, we are also working with other local and international companies that we expect to either purchase, and this is also a point to note. We are also working with other local and international companies that we expect to either purchase property, renovate, open their operation, and hire employees within the coming months. We are expecting a well-known, and I'm sure that Senator would like to hear this, because we are expecting a well-known skating and recreational facility to refurbish and reopen its doors in Grand Bahama. We are expecting a medical school, absolutely Bahamian, absolutely. You know, I don't want to call the name because it has not yet been announced, but you know them very well. A medical school in preliminary discussions to bring as many as 200 international medical students to create a facility in Grand Bahama. A major fabric store has applied to expand and open a location in Grand Bahama. As a result of, and they asked about the tech initiative, as a result of our GB Tech Hub initiative, a technology company has applied for approval and has expressed a desire to train and hire 50 Bahamians. An approved stem cell facility, which I'm sure the minister knows quite well, has decided to actually open its doors, not in New Providence, but open its doors in Grand Bahama. And an international cosmetics company has made application and desires to use Grand Bahama as a logistics hub. These are companies, and I want to stress this, these are companies that are at various stages of the approval process. And while not yet fully approved or in operation, we are hopeful that they and others will be open and fully staffed this year, Madam President. Madam President, the Tech Hub initiative, because this was mentioned by Senator Colby. The government has embarked on an initiative to establish and grow the technology sector in the Bahamas, with the intent of attracting international entrepreneurs and investors to the Bahamas, as well as cultivating local Bahamian entrepreneurs and knowledge professionals to work in the tech industry. Additionally, the government of the Bahamas is focused on making Grand Bahama the tech hub of the Bahamas, given its current technology infrastructure, proximity to North America, international shipping services, and available land for real estate development. Following the Tech Summit, the government sought out to engage professionals across relevant government agencies, as well as the private sector, for recommendations on how best to cultivate our technology hub. We didn't just want to go ahead and do it haphazardly. The committee has been working diligently over the past several months and has already made a presentation to the Cabinet outlining its conclusions, which have been welcomed and are currently being considered. Technology, they said, and this is what they're paraphrasing the committee, should be the third pillar of our economy because of the need to diversify the economy, expand it beyond tourism and financial services, the need also to provide employment and wealth-building opportunities for Bahamians, and Freeport, Bahamas is also the ideal location for this. The vision for the technology sector is for this to be a significant contributor to the Bahamian economy and to our GDP. We want it also to be a major employer and a major wealth creator for Bahamians. We also wanted to support the development of knowledge professionals and the position the Bahamas has as a technology innovator. It is clear that for Grand Bahama and the Bahamas, the tech industry will support real estate, it will support business tourism, it will support retail, construction, transportation, and business services. This is the direction that we need to be heading in. The committee has recommended 2 immediate opportunities, one of which we have already begun. The first one, the H-1B visa company relocation program. This involves recruiting companies to come to Grand Bahama who have specialized, high-quality, specialized talent. The committee states that this program can provide significant economic impact to Grand Bahama in the areas of housing, national insurance, food, entertainment, education, healthcare, and government taxes. This was taken from the Irish model, who are one of the world's top locations for tech companies and one of the fastest growing economies. The second and immediate opportunity involves a major international blockchain and cryptocurrency conference. In this regard, we also intend to facilitate this conference to establish the Bahamas as a global major player in introducing venture investors to seed stage and early stage companies that are focused on blockchain, cryptocurrency, and fintech solutions. We intend to call it the Bahamas Blockchain and Cryptocurrency Conference, and it is scheduled for June of this year. This venture conference is designed to drive activity to Grand Bahama by attracting investors, entrepreneurs, and service providers from all over the world who are focused on making investment and building business relationships with blockchain technology companies. Additionally, this venture conference is designed to provide the Bahamas with the opportunity to present itself to the world as a jurisdiction that has established policies that are favorable to blockchain, cryptocurrencies, IOCs, and fintech companies that incorporate and are domiciled in the Bahamas. There is also an opportunity to present Freeport, Grand Bahama, as the ideal location to establish offices and global headquarters for these new technology companies. Our goal, Madam President, is a high one. It is to attract 500 blockchain, cryptocurrency, and fintech companies to Grand Bahama this coming June. It is a high goal, but I believe we can do it. Madam President, I'm pleased to see that the central bank also is moving forward in the direction with their recent blockchain seminar. Madam President, I'm under no illusions. This is a major undertaking. This whole tech initiative is a major undertaking. We will not be completed in a year. We will not be completed in 2 years. This is likely, Madam President, to take years, and we are only at the very beginning and have not yet scratched the surface of what needs to be done to truly make a significant difference. However, there are some positive signs apart from the success of the Tech Summit, and they've asked us to provide us with this update, so we will. We have seen interest by tech companies and there are 2 in particular who have already applied for approval for Grand Bahama. One which has a focus on cybersecurity and another which has a focus on biotechnology. In addition, we have seen and are presently evaluating at least 2 proposals for the creation of smart cities in Grand Bahama as a result of our GB Tech initiative. We are very pleased that we have received notice also recently that one of the companies that the Prime Minister met with in Texas have decided to hold their major conference in the Bahamas. Our office also, Madam President, has also received a proposal from the Bahamas Development Bank, which we are very, very interested in and hope to report back shortly. They propose, Madam President, a partnership with our office to train Bahamians in software design, coding, and app creation, and then provide equity funding for participants to develop in this industry. And Madam President, I agreed immediately to partner with them on the condition that Grand Bahama is the focus of their program. Madam President, Absolutely. Madam President, the micro, small, and medium enterprises are vital to our communities. Their sustainability and success are indicative of a country's economic growth. In this regard, the government has dedicated itself to empowering small businesses to thrive. And you know, this was one of the things that was actually specifically mentioned by Senator JoBeth Colby Davis. So I want to say what the government in Grand Bahama is doing for small businesses. We have set out to spark a spirit of entrepreneurship among Bahamians, and as such have committed to creating an environment conducive to the creation of small businesses by way of provisions of funding, training programs, and mentorship for other professionals. The Office of the Prime Minister in Grand Bahama launched several initiatives this past year to help local startups and existing businesses to thrive. Through our very first business-to-business expo, large industrial corporations presented their inventory and purchasing needs to small business communities. This unique opportunity was a means of empowering small businesses to be able to supply those needs at a better rate and a faster delivery. So we're thankful to Buckeye, and we're thankful to the Grand Bahama Shipyard, who were the first companies to participate. And we will have another set of companies that will be participating the end of this month in April of April of this year. I think on the 26th of April, we will be having our second business-to-business. This will include PharmaChem, it will include the Bahamas Celebration or Bahamas Paradise, and it will also include, I'm missing the second, and also include Statoil. So these three major companies will be opening themselves and will be providing what opportunities that local small businesses will be able to take advantage of in trading with them. This one, Madam President, is a project that I'm very, very pleased about, Madam President. It is the 9th Apr program, which was launched this past October. The 30 participants are currently enrolled in this program and have completed the introductory workshop, which first exposed them to honey production industry, as well as the rigorous interview process. They then went on to participate in a 14-week hands-on training process, which was conducted by the International American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, designed to prepare them to create and sustain their own businesses. To put it generally, we took a group of 30 young people from Grand Bahama, trained them in the honey-making process. After they were trained in the honey-making process for the 14 weeks, in fact, during the 14 weeks, we also paid them a stipend to keep them along. After the 14 weeks, they formed themselves into a company, which was part of the program. Their company now is called the Grand Bahama Beekeeping Cooperative Society Limited. During their training, the Apr participants received the technical and management support. So the beauty about this was they didn't just receive training on how to make the products, but they received training on how to open up a business. They received training on the accountancy, on legal. They received training on marketing, packaging, on how you develop a business. And then we didn't leave them there, but the Bahamas Development Bank provided the funding for them, and that process is going on right now because they are at the end of the training, and so the Bahamas Development Bank is transitioning them into funding them to expand their businesses. But here is the wonderful thing about it. Even before they finished their training, they were able to make and show their production abilities. So, Madam President, I have here with me 2 honey jars produced by those 30 young people. Madam President, unfortunately, I didn't learn from the first time I said this, but the bees were the one that produced the honey, but they were able to facilitate the process and packaged it and put it in a way where it's actually going to be sold. And Madam President, I'm so proud of those 30 young people because they are on their way. They are on their way to not just getting a job and not just starting their own business, but they are on their way to making a dent into us being self-sufficient. They are on their way, you know, Madam President, and I'm so pleased that they have been able to craft this and market this, and I'm sure that once they've received the full funding from it, you are then going to be able to see these on the shelves at your grocery stores, and you're going to be able to see them in the airports, and you're going to see them in the hotels and all over. And I just want to say how pleased we are, Madam President, by this project. And I want to show it. I want to be able to present one of these, Madam President, to you, the President of the Senate, and then I want to present one to the former Minister for Grand Bahama, because this is, I believe, what we should be doing in Grand Bahama. We should be training our young people. We should be providing our young people with opportunities, providing them with funding, and then letting them go and letting them shine. So, Madam President, these are two that I'm going to present to them. So, Madam President, also, absolutely, they are getting the funding from the Bahamas Development Bank. So, Madam President, also, what I want to say is we want to get to the micro and small business grant program as I wrap up. Applicants interested in starting a business, and again, this was one of the things that was mentioned by the Senator. So I'm glad that I'm able to answer her query as to what the government is doing in Grand Bahama about small business development. Applicants interested in starting a business or growing their existing businesses had the opportunity to participate in a 2-week-long business readiness training course, within which they gained insightful information on business management tips like bookkeeping, customer service, and marketing. They were also able to make a pitch to a panel of experts to be awarded up to $5,000 in a business grant. Thus far, I am pleased to say that there have been 44 businesses, 20 startups, and 24 existing businesses which were awarded grant funding and have been assigned business mentors. And I want to say this also. This week, we will commence another group of 80 persons who have either have a small business and want to expand, or who want to also start a small business. So this coming Tuesday night, there will be another 80 that will start those same courses, Madam President. They asked what is being done about small businesses to help people in Grand Bahama. This is exactly what the FNM is all about, Madam President. So, Madam President, I want to say as I take my seat, Madam President, you know, we did in the 31st of December of last year, Madam President. The 31st of December, Madam President, a wonderful thing happened in Grand Bahama, and I want to make mention of it. About 40+ churches got together, Madam President, on New Year's Eve. They decided that they would sacrifice, which is one of the most popular and well-attended services, that they would sacrifice their services at their own churches, and that they would go to the park and have a service on the park. It was called the Move. Madam President, there were some declarations that were made by pastors and made by particular persons on that field. But the general thrust of that was that this year was going to be better than next year. And that it wasn't just about the government, it wasn't just about politics, but it was also about putting our trust in God to also help us in Grand Bahama. I endorse that 100%, Madam President, because if we are truly going to see success, if we are truly going to see our economy do better and continue to do better, we must also put our trust in God to be able to help us and to help us to move forward with the wisdom and the understanding to do these things. It's not just about politics, but Madam President, it is also about accepting that we need the help of God to do it. So, Madam President, I want to thank all of those pastors who participated in this. I want to thank the Deputy Prime Minister for his budget communication. I also want to particularly thank the Prime Minister for his leadership, for all of the focus and vision that he has had for this team. And Madam President, he is doing an excellent job as our Prime Minister. I support him, Madam President. I support my colleagues, and I pray that by the grace of God, we will continue to do good for the Bahamian people. Thank you very much, Madam President.
As many, Chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Anna Faye Ferguson Knowles.
You gotta give some honey to this young lady. She needs some honey.
What they gave me, you could help you. It's actually a soap they made out of honey.
Yeah.
Make sure the nation there, you
Thank you very much. I rise today to make a brief contribution to the 2017-2018 mid-year budget report. To a great extent, I would focus on how the budget affects the family islands, and to a lesser degree, how it affects education. Madam President, before I get into the meat of my presentation, kindly permit me to say a few words that I deem pertinent at this time. On Friday past, I was late getting to the Senate. This was no fault of mine, as I had to take a plane from my island, which is Crooked Island, where we only have flight twice per week, Wednesdays and Saturdays. And by the time I arrived here at the Senate had adjourned. And I really wanted to get here to do some things. But thank God for small blessings. I wanted to be in this honorable place to pay my respect to the late Honorable Teresa Moxie Ingram, a lady worthy of praise. We share the same profession, that of a teacher. She was a kind-hearted and fearless woman who gave of her time, talent, and tithes. She rose above many barriers and excelled in education and politics, especially from the early 80s. I admire her leadership skills. She was definitely a pace setter. In the words of Sir Elton John, I salute her in life as well as in death. And I say of her basking in the deep sleep, good night, Bahamian Rose. You've lived your life like a candle in the wind, never fading. Your candle burn out long before your legend will. Sleep in eternal peace. And I extend sympathy to her husband, her daughter, mother, and the entire family. On that same note, I would like to extend my sympathy to the family of the late William Bullard, a well-known gentleman from civic service, and he has gone home to reap his just reward. Madam President, homecomings and regattas and reunions are some of the glues that keep the settlements in the family of islands together. whether it's Betsy Bay or Salty Fest in Inagua, Rollville, Homecoming, Roxham, Crooked Island, Auckland's, Cat Island, Long Island, Spanish Well, or Abaco. Homecoming. The family islanders appreciate these times to relax, excuse me, and enjoy good company from all over the globe. Since Monster Hurricane hit the islands of the Bahamas, and of course, Hurricane Joaquin that hit the south, particularly Crooked Island, we were not able to host homecomings and other events of that nature. But I give thanks to the Almighty and to the newly elected president, Ms. Beverly Pinder Gibson, and her team. They were able to pull off a successful Crooked Island homecoming during this Easter holidays. I, along with many others, were honored, myself being a recipient for being the president of and a long-time member of that Homecoming Association from its inception. Many thanks to the team, and it seems to me that we are back on our feet again in Crooked Island. Madam President, there is still a lot of work to do, but with the help of the Ministry of Agriculture and Marine Resources, which is responsible for homecoming, next year's homecoming should be bigger and better. At this time, I'd like to send a shout out to all those persons and visitors and friends who journeyed to the land of peace, relaxation, tranquility, and some fun during the holidays. Madam President, I am optimistic about the direction in which this country is headed, and this year's midterm budget is indicative of the way forward. In my experiences, in prudent planning is pivotal to success. The new administration is embarking and putting needed structural foundation to the many initiatives that are already here and those that are in the pipeline. The family islands are poised to benefit from all of these initiatives. Madam President, it is pleasing that the domestic economy is rebounding gradually from many years of weak growth. This is great news for family islanders. The ease of doing business is a welcome initiative for us family islanders. For far too long, some businesses have been bombarded with, in my opinion, unnecessary rituals. And if that was not all, you had to wait months, sometime even a year, to obtain your business license in the family island. Many family islanders had to travel to the capital to complete their business license transaction for them to obtain their business license. We await this timely invention, and with the ease of doing business comes a one-time waiver fee for small businesses with turnover of under $100,000. It's my understanding that this will happen in the new fiscal year, and family islands are poised to take advantage of this new initiative. Employment in many of the family islands are low, but it is very pleasing to see that what the government is doing to assist the unemployed through the various ministries. I speak now of the Ministry of Social Services and Urban Development. I commend the minister for this wise initiative. 8 urban centers have been established throughout the Family Islands. There are also 6 centers in Grand Bahama and 9 in New Providence. This is commendable, Madam President. I can tell you that it's one of the greatest forms of job creation in the Family Islands. And everywhere I go in the islands, and through New Providence as well, persons are overjoyed and excited about the prospect and the spin-off in these various settlements that urban development would bring. Madam President, urban is doing what it sets out to do. People serving people. As I speak, there are 7 centers and a directorate, which is a head office functioning in islands, Crooked Island, Aucklands, Long Island, Cat Island, Eleuthera, Andros, Abaco, and Exuma. I believe some of those center managers are watching now and listening. Center managers are engaged with their workers in the centers. These family islanders are really working in their own hometown. Most of their money stays within that community. That's important, the family islanders, Madam President. There are approximately, I think, 50 or more persons employed or scattered out through those centers. To add to the success of urban, labor on the blocks is coming to the Family Island. I know it has been in New Providence in many areas, and it has also been in Grand Bahama. And the next step, I was reliably informed, would be Eleuthera. So Eleuthera, get ready for labor on the blocks. Urban also has identified and is in the process of helping many Bahamians in the Family Islands with small roof repair. It's amazing how hurricane destroys persons in most of these Family Islands. And we know that hurricane attacks roofs. And while urban does not deal too much with repairs of home, it certainly does minor repairs to roof. So that is welcome in the Family Island as well. Madam President, the availability of Crown land for Bahamians to erect small businesses and bonefish lodges is another advantage that Family Islanders are excited about. This, coupled with duty-free, is a boost for the island's economy. Bonefishes, as they catch and release, is now a mainstay on the islands, and many of the islands. However, the Ministry of Agriculture and Marine Resources must monitor some of the activities that occur on those Bahamian flats. I like the idea of feeding yourself, which was initiated by the Ministry of Agriculture, because in a number of the Family Islands, farming and fishing is still the mainstay. It's important that we have our backyard farming, and it is welcome in the Family Island. Most persons in the Family Island have a little backyard farm. The implementation of specialized programs to equip the youth with essential job skills could also be used as an opportunity to create jobs in the Family Island. Family Islanders welcome the process of gaining skills to enhance their ability in the various jobs that are created. The mid-year budget speaks to mandating preschool learning from 2 to 5 years. What it's saying that at the age of 2, you can begin preschool. It is my understanding that schools in the Family Island would be given adequate staff and equipment for preschool facilities, and I await the arrival of that initiative. I'm happy that in Nagua and Exuma is poised to have new school during the next fiscal year. Madam President, I look forward to the days when young people don't have to leave their homes in the Family of Island to seek job opportunities in New Providence and elsewhere, unless they wish to do so. I've seen islands being depleted because residents leave and most of them don't return. Since 2015, about 3 to 4 hurricanes have devastated certain islands in the Bahamas. Many communities in the Family Islands have been hard hit. Some people are still struggling. Many persons need help in rebuilding their homes. The Ministry of Work, through the Minister, the Honorable Desmond Bannister, have advised that persons insure their home because there is only so much the government can do. That's not a bad idea. We do not have some of the challenges. It varies from island to island. Challenges of home repair varies from Family Island to Family Island. I invite persons to heed the warning of insuring your home. And then he further went to say that the most they could give to assist persons is $4,000. I say to persons in the Family Island, every dollar counts and every little can help. And so this is a caring government, and so we need to tap into the resources that the government offers. On a positive note, the communities are recovering slowly but surely. In fact, Ragged Island is poised to be rebuilt, and as was stated by the Prime Minister, it perhaps might be the first green island. But we await that manifesting. I'm sure I have every confidence in the Prime Minister that that is going to happen. Madam President, as the government resolved to put Bahamians back to work, I am mindful that the whole and capital and other expenditure was perhaps needful. But to a minimum degree, it caused some pain to a number of workers in the Family of Islands. I am all for fiscal prudent means of financing. It's a good thing to tighten the belt, but it should not be to the extent where the police in the islands are handicapped because of fuel problem. The environmental officer must not be restricted from spraying for mosquitoes because the mailboat didn't bring any fuel. The inter-island ferry should not stop because someone did not budget for fuel. Fuel should not be a factor when it comes to the Family Islands. We depend on the services of the mailboat to keep us Family Islanders on par with the rest of the Bahamas and by extension the world. I have every confidence in the Minister of Finance that the monies will be released in a timely fashion so that these small issues would be resolved. The gap between the Family Islands and the capital is filling up. And this is happening through the digital world that we are connected to. It is heartwarming to note that the Office of the Prime Minister has opened offices in some of the family islands: Abaco, Exuma, and soon to be Eleuthera. Again, this is a form of job creation. Infrastructures in the family islands are on the upward swing. Roads, particularly in the southern islands, have ongoing construction. I maintain that these roads should be monitored and inspected by professional engineers for the continuity of accountability. The same is true for the docks. Madam President, as I commend the Minister of Finance, the Honorable K. Peter Turnquest, Deputy Prime Minister, and the government for such a comprehensive mid-year budget for the 6 months period leading to the 31st of December 2017. And I stand proudly to adopt this mid-year budget. Thank you.
As many, the chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Kwesi Thompson.
Madam President, thank you. I just wanted to address, there was a matter that was raised by by Senator Darville with respect to the lunch vendors in Grand Bahama and the payment of the lunch vendors in Grand Bahama. What I've been advised of, Madam President, is that the lunch vendors are in Grand Bahama are paid up to the end of February. They will be receiving their March payments no later than Wednesday. And once they've received their March payments by Wednesday, then they will be up to date. And so with the exception of that 1 month payment, which will be done on Wednesday, the lunch vendors in Grand Bahama are up to date.
Thank you, Senator. While we do have this slight break, I just want to mention that, as most of you know, Senator Renard Henfield was in a car accident on his way to the Senate this morning. Speaking to him just prior to the lunch break, he indicated he was still at the hospital with a neck brace. So as soon as we hear from him, we'll bring an update. But as you leave the Senate this evening, just put in a word of prayer for him and his family at this time. The chair now recognizes Senator the Honorable Fred Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam President. One of the things I liked about the structure of this debate is that those from the government side spoke, and we knew what the government's position is on various things, and then we have a chance to respond. And that's always how I thought it should be structured, because at the end of the day, the mover of the motion gets to wind up the debate in any event. But the whole idea, I think, for the elucidation of the public is for the government to put its position and the opposition be in a position to respond to it. I need to do one kind of cleaning up thing. When I spoke the last time, I was going to wait since the leader of government business fancies himself as a man of literature. When I spoke in my words of condolences for the late Teresa Moxie Ingram, I ascribed the authorship of the line, "Death be not proud," to an American author. And something bothered me about that the whole time I was thinking about it. And I went and I actually checked, and I was horrified because it's actually John Donne. It's a sonnet by John Donne. And I got myself mixed up with a poet, a Jamaican poet, who later became an American, Claude McKay, whose poem actually begins, "If we must die, let it not be like dogs and hogs, but Anyway, I got mixed up, so I just want to correct that for the record, that the actual author of the poem, Death Be Not Proud, is actually John Donne, who I believe is a Scotsman, to make that point. The Minister for Grand Bahama, and basically for this purpose I'll just be going through a checklist of the things that I heard, but the Minister for Grand Bahama was very expert and adept. He almost had me convinced by his line of attack, which was to use a lot of statistics from the IMF and from the central bank. And I was reminded immediately of that line, which is properly ascribed to Mark Twain, that says, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. And I say that because the more serious point is this, that it amazed me that the IMF could actually say the economy has turned the corner when all the measures that we know of, the debt, the deficit, the unemployment figures, have gone in the upward direction, but they say that the economy has turned the corner. Wonders never cease, but you know, it's the IMF. And you can concentrate, and I warn every government, because every government in the Caribbean is a victim of this, be careful how you concentrate on the macro picture and not what is actually happening on the ground. Because as all you erudite gentlemen and ladies were speaking today, text messages were coming to me, Mr. Mitchell, do you know any place where I can find a job? So your statistics might say lots of things, but the fact is there are people, the reality on the ground is people are still hunting for work. Right? And what has amazed me about this period is the number of people who actually complain that they don't have money to buy food to eat. That astounds me. So you got to be very careful how you tout this macro picture, because it's what's actually taking place in people's homes. I remember in 2008, and I used the book of Genesis when the whole bottom fell out of the economy worldwide. And I used the book of Genesis, you know, the dream of 7 years of plenty that Joseph interpreted, the 7 years of plenty and the 7 lean years. And I said this would be over in 7 years. But it isn't. And in those days, people in homes worth $250,000, $350,000, if you went in, their cupboards were bare. No food to eat. That's the actuality on the ground. So I was glad when you brought your package, because I got my package too. I brought my corned beef. I brought my corned beef. I mean, please, Dr. Sand, don't attack my corned beef. You know, my leader yesterday told me that he had just sat down to breakfast a fire engine, only to read that Dr. Dwayne Sands wants to take corned beef off the protected list. Now, the serious point is this. What I remember about this meal, I haven't eaten corned beef in a long time, but, you know, doctors say no red meat, okay, so that's me. And that gives you an example of how you get to persuade people to change their diet. The doctor tells you, don't do so and so. And that's what I meant in the statement about economic coercion. What it shows is that taxes do not change people's habits. Yeah. They don't. And so you have to find another mechanism to get people to shift their dietary practices. But right now, this costs me $1.99. And I'll tell you this. When I was a kid, my parents, we did two things there were two meals that we ate on a Saturday evening. One was either pig feet souse or corned beef. And my mother used to have this. This used to be put in the refrigerator. It was cold. She took it out. She sliced it in thin slices, put it in slices on a bed of lettuce with some lemon and some onions, and we ate that with white rice. No, I'm talking about corned beef. I know the difference between corned beef and Spam. That's what we ate on a Saturday evening. And I think about all that stuff in retrospect now because it was obviously an economic decision. It was a cheap meal to do on a Saturday evening. And I'm saying that we have to be careful how we get, and all governments are victims to this. You can't have your head in the clouds about the actual practicalities of what people have to face. I saw where they said the Prices Commission and the minister actually gets up and says, we must have stir-fried salmon instead of corned beef and rice. You know how much stir-fried salmon costs? I checked it. A meal in Mr. Diagula's shop costs $14.99 for salmon. Fire engine costs $2.50. All right, it's not his shop. I withdraw it. It's not his shop. But you got my point. The serious point is, if you are going to adjust the prices, the price control items in a bread basket, you have to be very careful how you proceed with that. And use other means. And of course, the sector, the fast food sector, has already responded in the newspaper this morning about the whole idea of putting taxation on them. I was going to ask the Attorney General, how are you going to do that without discriminating against other businesses? How are you going to define what is fast food? Because people now go to Bamboo Shack, to Sammy's, to Kentucky Fried Chicken, to Burger King, to McDonald's. So you're going to put taxes on all of them, but Atlantis gets no tax on their buffet. And a buffet, what is in the marketplace, what is it, $75 a meal? So if you're talking about rich people, they can stand the tax, but the poor people on the $2.50 fire engine, which they get from the restaurant of choice, which they go to get their breakfast before they go to school, can't stand the tax. So I just put that word of caution. Be very careful about making these macro arguments without thinking about what the micro situation is in people's homes. I had a question to ask about the Oban agreement, and I think the arguments were covered fairly thoroughly by our side. But perhaps in his winding up, the Attorney General might say whether he believes that the agreement, the heads of agreement, is in fact an enforceable agreement. Is this an agreement which is enforceable in law? Because if it is enforceable in law, and I looked at some of the dictionary as opposed to legal definitions of what a heads of agreement is. If it is, some people say heads of agreement are just general heads and that you agree and you then have a contractual agreement. But if this heads of agreement is an agreement which is enforceable, I would like to know how the government proposes, without damages, to be able to get out of a contract an agreement which says that no matter what the EIA is, you cannot get out of the agreement. You cannot cancel the agreement on the basis of a negative environmental impact assessment. Is that what it says? I've misread it? Well, again, I'd love to know what the answer is in fact to that. Because my reading of it is that the government cannot cancel the agreement on the basis of a negative environmental impact assessment study. Now, the other point I would like to make is that when we come to the vote with regard to this resolution, you will forgive us if we can't see our way clear to support this. Had this been a resolution which dealt with the actual country's finances, that is, the government makes the case that we are borrowing some money for some specific purposes, The principle of the Progressive Liberal Party is that we do not oppose the government in that kind of resolution. But not a resolution which is in fact getting the opposition to agree that the Minister of Finance has done a great job. Because from our point of view, and I would say the objective facts, that doesn't seem to be the case to us at all. And I was telling my colleagues when I read the mid-year budget statement that I was reminded of the Mother Goose rhyme that says this: little Jack Horner sat in the corner eating a Christmas pie. He put in his thumb and pulled out a plum and said, "What a good boy am I."
I remember when I was here all about
Self-praise. 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 Self-praise is no praise. Self-praise is no praise. Self-praise is no praise. As a matter of fact, Corinthians tells you that charity is not puffed up. It vaunteth not itself. So let others tell you that you've done well, but don't pat yourself on the back. Don't pat yourself on the back. And some of the issues we have is this. From a philosophical point of view, what some of us don't understand is this. What is the issue about borrowing and debt and deficits and so on and so on? Intrinsically, what is the issue? Because the country has the ability to repay. One, the country has the ability to repay. And the country has the ability to grow itself out of any difficulties that it has. The country can't develop without borrowing. Nothing will happen. It'll come to a full stop. The country was being managed in a way, its finances were being managed in a way that the cash flow of the country was being carefully shepherded by the people, the same officials you have, but for one, in the Ministry of Finance. Every day. Paul Adley, James Smith, Barry Christie, Michael Halkitis. I dare say Carlton Francis. Here's the drill. You walk into work, it's the Minister of Finance, the public officials come to you, say, "Minister, this is what is in the bank, this is what we got to pay today." It is inconceivable for a Minister of Health under a Progressive Liberal Party administration to walk into a cabinet and say, "I can't buy HIV medication for the hospital," and the response is, "You got to wait till the second tranche is released." That couldn't happen with us. And I'm happy to see, I'm fine, you all found the money. But you know, what we keep telling public officials is, your role, you know, last year you were opposition. Great to describe problems. But your role is not to describe problems now. Yeah, it's to fix them. To fix them. All right. Not to tell me that you ran out of medication. You know. You know, and this is one of the arguments I have with our mutual friend, the Honorable Minister for Education. You know, you're not a talk show host anymore. No. You're not. You're the Minister for Education. You gotta put the curriculum in the schools and make sure it has all the tools to educate the kids. That's what you do. And don't go around saying, "Yeah, people are gonna say it's victimization, but I don't care." How could you say that? Everything we know about him is antithetical to that kind of value. One is an English Catholic and one is a Roman Catholic, but the values are the same. The little words changed here or there in the Mass, but you know. Yeah, one holy and Catholic and I. But my point is the larger point. Fix the problems. And I come to education because of this. When I read this BEPS process that we are now undergoing, it suddenly occurred to me in a new way that the problems which we face in the Bahamas as a small country are getting ever more complex. It requires more and more intellectual talent. I don't understand why the Caribbean as a whole does not see that it is better for us to act in concert, but each of us are busy struggling by themselves. 100,000 down in St. Vincent, 150,000 in St. Lucia. Barbados got 250,000. Jamaica has 2 million. You know, Cuba has 7. But all of us are individually struggling. And in the process, the EU is winning the game. It is almost as if we're being recolonized. I said, just to finish this point about the sophistication which this requires, there's an American diplomat here, and he came to see me as foreign minister one day, something they were complaining about. There's always an endless list of what we don't do and what we don't do and so on and so on. And I just gave this sigh of relief when he, you know, exasperation when he came and said, okay, what is it today? So he said, well, Minister, you are the ones who said you wanted to be independent. So if you want to be independent, you got to be able to pay for it and do what's necessary to be independent. And I said, okay, touche. So no more complaints from me. But what I do know is that in the morality of the general construct of the way the world goes now, where these people are imposing what I call unfunded mandates on us, because we're going happily along in a relatively regulation-free society. That's the joy of living in these places. I say to people all the time, I cannot live in the United States of America. Too many rules. Drives you crazy. You can't do this, you can't do that, so on and so forth. So that's the joy of living in this place. But now all these things are being imposed upon us, no way to pay for it. And guess what? Perhaps this is a lot of circumlocution, but if you bear with me, this point. The Caribbean Prime Minister has complained to Joe Biden, Vice President, said, look, the Americans are stealing all our talent. And he said, yeah, that's true. The United States wants the smartest people in the world. We can afford it, so anyone you can produce, we can take them. Sorry about that. And that's what's happening. So at the same time that all these sophisticated mandates are being imposed upon the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, our talent is leaving us, and it's talent that goes to other countries because they can be offered a higher price. And guess what? It is our tax dollars that are paying for the education so these people can give their talents to other societies. And there's got to be something, no one makes the moral case against these people for that. And the problem is, because the post-colonial era is so far away, the present leaders of these countries, the United States, you see the post-world order is now falling apart, or falling apart, and the EU, they don't remember, you know, the great struggles which the liberals in their societies had for countries like ours to be free and independent. All they see us is a set of crooks in the Caribbean who are trying to steal their tax dollars, and they're making a case that we must collect their tax money for them. At the same time, what they're doing is denuding us of all the talent which we have, because they have the money to do so. And we're using the tax dollars which they're now denying us because of these mandates for us to train the kids for them to go to their societies. There's something pernicious, immoral, unethical about it. And I wish we could really make a public stand as a region against this. And that's why my love affair has always been, as a matter of public policy, with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the work it does. Because it's not the work of the Minister for Financial Services or the Deputy Prime Minister or the minister or the Prime Minister to be watching whether some words in some letter are exactly the opposite it's supposed to be. That's what the Foreign Service does. And we, when we're in office, tried to build up a foreign service to do precisely that. And I'm really aggrieved at the fact that, first of all, it appears that the foreign service has been gutted and not relied upon properly to do its job. It seemed as if there was this thing about, you know, we're going to save money by bringing this one home and bringing the next one home, and it ended up that everyone who's brought home has been replaced. Well, you tell me the exceptions. You tell me the exceptions. No, I mean, I understand, and I understand that, but you know, there's sinecures too. Everybody has to have a sinecure. That's the way the system works, eh? And you don't come and pretend that there's some moral high ground on this. But what I'm saying is, do not give the impression, because even today, people call up and say, I'm stuck in some country overseas. Someone from the Philippines calling me today, as a matter of fact, better example. And I remember this like yesterday. The day, 2 days after I lost the election in 2007, no longer foreign minister, some parent calls me frantically, her daughter is about to be deported out of Grenada. And they couldn't get anyone to help. So I called someone who called someone, and they actually got the lady off the plane in Grenada. Took her off the plane, one phone call. And she came to me today, she said, you never met me, I didn't know you, you did this, I wanted to thank you for doing that. That's the Foreign Service. That's the Foreign Service. And I'm saying we have to ensure, we have to ensure that we have a Foreign Service, because that's the service which is going to lift us above our weight. And these young people, all of them are anxious to serve overseas. The money which they get paid is not very good. So everybody joins the Foreign Service to serve overseas. And I don't want, you know, and I say this advisedly, I don't want anyone at a political level going cherry picking and say, this one was close to Mitchell, the next one was close to Mitchell, so they can't serve overseas, and stopping the growth of these people's careers because this one is identified as connected with me or the PLP and so on and so forth. None of that came before me. I remember, you know, two people in particular. They both still work for the Foreign Service. Yeah, you know, and I mean, people in my party were hysterical about this individual. You know, when are you going to do this? And I said, you know, one of your public officials called me up and said, look, X, Y, and Z. I said, fine. We're going to ensure that that doesn't happen. And that's what you do, because that's not supposed to be the way it works. Not supposed to be the way it works. One fella, he even had the temerity to go campaigning with the torchbearers in North Eleuthera with his red shirt on, a Foreign Service officer. So I said to the Director General, I said, what's this? What's this? I mean, you know, I don't know about that. I'm talking about this particular incident. I'm talking about my conduct as a minister in response to that. I don't know about what you're talking about. You know, I didn't talk about that. I'm talking about what your response is to it. And they said to me, you know, they protected him. They said, oh, well, Minister, you know, he didn't have the torch on his shirt. It was only red, you know. So I say, okay, I rest that case. But what I'm saying is that I do not want any discrimination against these people. And the thing is, the minister comes from a particular background. He's a religious individual, right? So I expect him, and I expect him to conduct that department in a way which appreciates that everybody has their choices. And that does not come before any politician. They do their jobs, and they're entitled to serve overseas, and they should go overseas. And for me, it was simply this. Bring me the list. In order of seniority, who goes, goes, and then, and the other thing is the opportunity to travel with the minister. That too is a big deal for these Foreign Service officers, to travel with the Prime Minister, to travel with the minister. And the reason I did it, you know, all this complaints about delegation, because we have a short window to get these young people up to speed on what they face in the international community. And there is no other way to do it than to do it. There's no other way to do it than to do it. So that's my bit on what we ought to be doing. Ought to be doing. I'm also concerned that there is still this public misunderstanding about BAMSI and what its role is and why the former Prime Minister led the way in trying to establish this operation. Free National Movement did an expert bit of propaganda because if you look or take their word for it, you would think that the only thing that happened at BAMSI in North Andros was a building burned down. That was it. The whole thing was a building burned down. But that's not BAMSI. That's not BAMSI. That's such a small part of what, I took the Chinese ambassador there, went and saw the facility, heard the aims and objectives of those who run the facility, and heard what they wanted to do. The thing is, Mr. Christie was a Minister of Agriculture. And, you know, from Pinling's time to Midge Hanna's time to Roca's time, all of them were always talking about food security and how we're going to feed ourselves. But the fact is, when I came home and my first job was as a radio producer / extension officer with the Bahamas Information Services, and I used to do the radio program for agriculture. That's how I first got to see the Bahamas. And in those days, pork production, the Bahamas was self-sufficient in pork. That was 1974. The Bahamas was self-sufficient in eggs, 1974. And all of those things have gone into reverse. So the question is, how do we reverse it? And so Christie says, gentlemen, we're going to spend this money trying to reverse this. First, it's going to be a school. Then it's going to help improve the stock around the country. For example, when I grew up as a kid, people used to talk about Long Island sheep runners, but hardly any sheep in Long Island today. The stock is run down. Goats as well. As a matter of fact, except Ragged Island. I mean, one of the funny stories about my visit to Ragged Island was that we thought we were going to have these public policy problems to talk about. And the meeting, I won't say, well, descended into a row between who's responsible for the goats being loose in Ragged Island. It was the most extraordinary meeting I sat through. Well, no, this is before the hurricane, because there must have been about 400 or 500 goats in Ragged Island. And people were saying you couldn't leave your door open because the goats would go in and eat all your food and so on and so forth. And so there was this fuss between two citizens about who was responsible for the goats being set loose in Ragged Island. But that was the exception. Everywhere, the stock has fallen off. And so BAMSI was designed to improve, to breed new stock and to provide stock for farmers across the country who wanted to improve their stock. That's one. They said, other thing they said is they did some research across the sector, because what you want to have is ties between the agricultural sector and the tourism sector. And they said, when people in the Bahamas eat fish, what do they eat it with? So we all put our hands up and said, limes. Throughout the country, the lime groves, the citrus groves are decimated. So BAMSI was designed to get that up and going again, to improve the stock, so that if farmers wanted to start groves in North Eleuthera, because North Eleuthera, when I came home in '74, was the second highest producing citrus area in the country after Abaco. Right. So, right. That's what they said. They also said they also looked at they canvassed the tourism sector, and they said to tourists, when you come to a paradise, what do you expect to see? And the tourists answered, coconut trees. If you're coming to paradise, they want to see coconut trees. So BAMSI If you go to Bamsi, you'll see rows and rows of coconut trees, again, for people to improve the stock, to grow the coconuts. And now you see that the practice has reached what used to happen in the Caribbean, or what still happens in the Caribbean. If you went around the savannah in Trinidad, you know, or in the streets in Jamaica, you can get fresh coconut water and jelly. And now I see the practice has actually popped up here in the Bahamas. So that's the reason for Bamsi. So I watched, and I'm watching very carefully, this so-called redesign, reconstruction, whatever, of Bamsi. And I think I read where they said that they do not want Bamsi to be competing commercially with the private sector. I think. But I caution this by saying this. I use this word of caution. Part of the training exercise for the students at Bamsi is also in marketing and sales. And that's the reason why you have this marketing and sales component, so the people who are there get to learn the process of how you market something and how you sell it. So it's not a commercial producer in the sense of another big farm like B.G. Harmon. This is meant to be a training operation for students. So I would caution that. So I come back now to the question of, the final point I would make is the question of this debt managing and the cash flow I was talking about. Recently, the IDB put into the public domain some advice to the government, saying, look, you're in a hurricane zone, and in next year's budget, you better put in some provisions or expect to have to make some short-term borrowing, because it is the only way you're going to be able to protect the country and get it back up and going from from hurricane damage. And I say that because when the last hurricane took place, and I remember it because it came the day after my birthday, the morning of the 6th of October at 4 o'clock, the hurricane came. This country was shut down from the 4th of October till the 9th. $100 million of revenue could not be collected during those days. And the only way we could get the country back up and going was to borrow $150 million. And no matter how you spin the story, leaders of the Free National Movement and the government, if you look at the math, the only difference between your deficit projections and ours is the hurricane. That's it. And you said it. Never mind what the minister said in the propaganda bits of his statement. When you actually look at the technical bits and you do the math, the difference is the hurricane. That's it. And I warn you, they're telling us hurricanes are coming again. And if you have a major hurricane, what are you going to do? And that's why we were so concerned. This business of, you know, my friend Norma knows. My mother used to do this. Mr. Gibson, Mr. Dames around the corner used to keep a little book. And we used to go to the shop, and every time we wanted something, Mr. Dames, Mr. Gibson wrote it down in the book. Right. On Friday, when the old lady gets paid, she sends us around the corner to pay Mr. Gibson and Mr. Dames. Except sometimes it was a little short. But Mr. Dames knew that the old lady, the old man, if we owed 10 pounds, would give him 7, say, I'll give you 3 on Monday, and I'll make it up. Everybody knows that's how the government does as well. You manage your cash flow. So you don't go and pay Kalina $60 million. Kalina can wait. They're a big player. But you put the medicine in the hospital and you buy the ventilator because you got to do it. Those are the choices you have to make daily. A minister of finance, just like you managing your household every month, is watching the balances in the bank. And that's what we were saying. If you manage the cash flow, you don't have to go into the arms of the IMF. Because in our view, it's not possible to pay off every single debt you have. You can't do it. You'll break yourself. Let's say the mantra you have now that you're going to pay off all the bills. Do you know how much money the Bahamas government owes for publicly acquired land now? Do you know? Last count was 500 million. 500 million. So you can borrow 500 million to pay all of that off too? Clearly, you negotiate the amounts. So that's our only advice on this. And I mean, you know, you're the government. You manage the affairs of the country. You manage the affairs of the country. And we managed them the best way we could and kept the country going. Kept it going to such an extent that we were able to hand it off to you, and you were able to borrow $750 million without blinking an eye.
Days is that bad, you couldn't get it.
And you boasted about how, no problem. You know, we went around the world, happy to lend us the money. But I say, be careful of that too. Because, you know, bankers will get you in trouble. They never lose. They always collect the interest. And so every time you come, it's only a question of how much it's going to cost. And they believe sovereign debt is cool. Never mind all this thing about C grade and so on and so forth. All that does is affect the price of what they're going to lend the money on. So we're not in a position to support this resolution. You're not surprised. And I think the debate has elucidated a lot of policy points. I say that those who are boasting about the tourism figures, you know, thank God for Bahama. The fake, phony hotel that was being set up by the crooks that we couldn't do business with and so on and so forth. But now it's all right to cut ribbons, and it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But as the leader of government says, that's governance. That's politics. I listened carefully to the changes announced on immigration. I'm a little weary when you start borrowing things from Australia. A little weary. Weary, W-A-R-Y. I don't want us to end up putting migrants in a camp in Papua New Guinea. But that's not possible. Okay, all right. Yes, that's a stretch. To Papua New Guinea? Do they pay well down there? We had a Bahamian who was working there, Elizabeth Smith, with the Commonwealth. Did a good job. But I want to see the details of this. The decision I was talking about today is, and obviously your people are looking at this, you know, but I want you all to win one case. I used to say this when I sat around the table. Please, Matt, win one case. Just win a case. Win one case, Matt. You know?
We could win a case.
I mean, win one case. Win one case, Matt. You know? Just win one case. You know? No, in the wind-up, you'll tell me all the things that I said wrong, no doubt. But, you know, I'm not very well behaved. So, yes. And please take my concern about this education system, the education ministers, and the investments we have to make in education quite seriously, you know. I had a long talk with a family in Saw Pond. 3 kids. First one, 4.0. Second one, 4.0. Both go to Canada, don't return home. Son is 3.96. They're worried now, what is he going to do? And they've invested all their money in their business, and they said, you know, what are we going to do? A friend of ours in Grand Bahama right now is desperately afraid that his child, if she doesn't get something to do, will move to Canada. And another young man who was training as a CPA the other day, speaking to him, he's married now, living in Tampa. And this is what is happening. Our school system, training our kids, using our tax dollars, these people imposing these things, taking away our tax dollars, and the kids are going to the developed societies to run those societies. So we believe that we can, if we grow this economy, just as we told the EU in our days. You know, I sat there before this EU commissioner. He was in a blue seersucker suit. Could you believe that? This was like watching a 1950s movie. The man sat there with a ceiling fan going, squeaking like in a Humphrey Bogart movie, and a fan. He's sitting in this chair, and he's telling me why the Bahamas can't get aid from the EU because we don't do what they ask them to do, what they ask us to do. And our government took the decision, we can do it out of the consolidated fund, to heck with your aid. And I hope that in things coming, at some point, we can stand up to these people and just do things for ourselves. And the only way to do that is if we grow our economy. But growing our economy can't be done if one hand is clapping and you always saying, it's the PLP, it's the PLP. All of us have to join to build this place, and we all want to build this place. And I wish that mantra would stop. So with those words, I say to our supporters out there, get ready, get ready. It's 49 months left. The countdown is on. We are the faithful few who will fight bravely to save the nation's life. Thank you, Madam President.
Well, we've heard from one poet. I suppose we'll hear from the other. The chair now recognizes Senator the Honorable Carl Bethel.
Thank you, Madam President. To quote Shakespeare, we few, we happy few, we band of brothers. That was before the Battle of Agincourt, where a small army slaughtered the nobility of France. Madam President, I would first like to commend all of the senators today for outstanding, I think, contributions and debates. Yes, I have 5 minutes. You know, I don't want my friend opposite to think for 1 minute that any of us on this side are immune to or insensitive to or unaware of the human suffering that still persists in this country. While we may cite the macro, we cite the macro to point to achievements, to send messages, to project the optimism that we hope is going to stir other persons to get involved, the business community, the banking sector. We point to the successes of the commercial enterprise bill, and I understand what colleagues opposite feel, but it is having success because we want that message to go out so that more could come. Because we're very concerned about particularly high-flying Bahamians that you spoke of towards the end of your contribution who have nothing and left, very little left. I've spoken about the assaults on our financial sector. We are not unaware of it. And I can give you an example of the, I would say, blatant discrimination, and I'd even go so far as to say racism, that is in this process because it's driven, it's managed by bureaucrats underneath squeaky fans in their seersucker suits. I remember Paul Adderley, former Attorney General, always saying that you're up there shaking the minister's hand, he's nodding his head in sympathy, and there's a fellow on the 5th floor who was writing the death warrant for your country, and you'll never meet him. Well, I mean, we're aware of that. But, you know, at the end of the day, we are in a process where those same bureaucrats are being driven by a civil society that is aggressive, that is malicious, that is, in my view, patently biased, if not racist. I saw a publication from an entity called Offshore Alert. That when I was first Attorney General, they used to telefax negative news about what they would call tax havens in those days. And this was posted all over the web. Major fine against a Canadian bank I won't name because I don't want to propagate that foolishness, for money laundering committed in the Bahamas and Cayman. I opened the story. Bahamas, Cayman, New York, London, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg. Okay, read the story in depth. Bahamas hardly get a mention. But the propaganda is being put out there and is being driven by an aggressive civil society that is offshore, also onshore in Europe. That's the reality. The possibilities of a CARICOM response, there's a certain degree now, I can assure colleagues, of uniformity across CARICOM in terms of how we're trying to coordinate our responses. We were drafting our own anti-terrorism bill of late, and then we recently were sent by Foreign Affairs a model CARICOM designed anti-terrorism bill, to which we then took the best parts because we thought we had, you know, a comparable bill that was Bahamian, but we took the best parts of both and made something new, but largely relying on CARICOM's assistance in this regard, so that at the end of the day we get a slightly better, we think, bill. But what we're starting to see is some degree of cooperation among CARICOM states. But we must bear in mind that not every one of the dependencies of Great Britain or the Netherlands are members of CARICOM, and so, you know, we have to be careful with that. Now, the reality is that this is not so much a recolonization exercise, but an exercise in extraterritorial power by Europe, particularly, as America did with its FATCA, to claim its tax base back. Unfortunately, the reality is that they have very strong perceptions that their taxpayers of worth have hidden their money all around the world. And so they are addressing these measures not only to the Caribbean, but to every single country in the world. I think I had reason to speak about Kazakhstan recently. I mean, that's a former Soviet republic, an Islamic place, talking about the need to enforce the laws on Islamic charities at the behest of the world, if you will. So what we see are unfortunate realities with which we must contend as a nation. Our job is really to do the best we can and think as clearly as we can and be as smart as we can to ensure that in making the transition to this new world order, that we can retain skills-based, competitive services that are not tax sensitive. That is the strategic goal. And our financial sector is in many ways already making the adaptation, moving away more towards boutique-type banks, offering specialized, responsive banker-to-customer services so that persons on a non-tax sensitive basis can have a personal relationship with their banking organization. So, you know, the changes must come. They're here and they will be made. They will be made because we've committed to making them. Certainly as far as anti-terrorism, money laundering, and I commend the good Senator Colby Davis for her passion for us to hurry up and pass the crime bills, and there are plenty of them that have to come. The anti-terrorism bill will be in short order. The financial and corporate services providers bill will be in short order. That's been fully agreed by the industry. We're making steps to do everything we can do to ensure that nobody can blacken the name or whiten the name, darken the name, call the name of the Bahamas in connection with any terrorist or money laundering type of allegation going forward. We're going to do what we have to do to ensure that the Bahamas becomes and remains a clean, and compliant blue chip offshore financial services sector. That is what we're going to do. We're confident we can achieve it. We felt that the issue of the blacklisting, I assure you, it was as simple as this. You didn't use the right words when you gave the political commitment that we asked for. For this reason, the government's already announced the intention to set up a diplomatic office in Brussels. And for good reasons, because that's the center between Brussels and Strasbourg, but really Brussels, of this whole thing. And we have nobody there on a 24-hour basis. That was a mistake made by successive governments. We all share the blame. I commend the former government for having done something that I was advocating since 2000, which was to set up an office, some office somewhere on the European continent. They chose Geneva. I think that was because of the initiatives of both government to move towards WTO and the United Nations office being there as well, and it was well placed. And I say that none of the staff there, to my knowledge, has been touched, and they are all excellent professionals. And I don't care, I know the minister don't care what their politics are. And they're young people. They are very competent, young, aggressive, hard-working Bahamians who are holding up the flag of our country high in the United Nations in Geneva and at the, in terms of our contacts with the WTO as we move towards accession. But we definitely need to get to Brussels. And we need to find a similar cadre of young Bahamians who have the skill, the aptitude, the language skills particularly, to be able to not necessarily speak French, but to understand it so you could hear. But certainly to intensify our day-to-day connections with the European Union so that we can avoid any future errors such as that which was exploited by 4 countries in Europe to put us on this blacklist. The last thing I'd say is that, as the government's lawyer, all I can say about Oban is what I've said. I've indicated to address some misconceptions of the public and to show that the agreement, the Oban agreement as drafted, provides protection to the Bahamian people in terms of safety, personal safety, and the environmental safety. And if those reasonable requirements of the government are not commercially viable, then, as I said earlier, the developer knows what they can do. On the question of borrowing, this is the last point I want to say, Minister. And then I have one joke to speak about Dr. Darville. I can bear it here very quickly. I understand the concept that it's just simply a money management problem. It is simply, yes, the budget and how you allocate funds is every day is money management. No question that. You decide, so for example, we have a gang of unresolved cost orders against the government, extending to several millions. We have cases that we don't think are defensible and would like to be able to settle them. So we don't have the money. But, by adequate money management in the next budget, we'll make whatever provision is required, enable to these things to be negotiated down, just as you said. That's exactly the strategy the Office of the Attorney General intends to pursue. But, there is a point you reach where your borrowing is so high and your borrowing requirements become so high that it's absolutely unsustainable. We're not there yet, but perilously close. One of our CARICOM sister countries, 2 of them in fact, have reached that point where it is unsustainable. And they are suffering dire economic consequences as a result of it. Dire. No, we don't want the Bahamas to go that way. I'll tell you privately. We don't want the Bahamas to go that way. And so we have to determine that too much is too much, scale back where we can, bring our fiscal house back into order, so then it's a little bit easier to juggle between the different types of debts that there are, and slowly, you know, moving a country that's heavily in debt to fiscal balance is like turning the Titanic in the face of an iceberg. But we've begun to make the turn. We've begun to make the turn. But in all things that we do, yeah, I think we've made the turn before the iceberg came into view. The iceberg is not yet in view, but we are making the turn. But everything we do has in mind those human beings, the individuals in our constituencies, those who call me too, even as an MP. And so I'm gonna, as a senator, pardon me, and no longer an MP. People who call me all the time. And so, Madam President, on those few notes, I just want to say the last thing to Senator Darville, where he was claiming credit for such progress as has been made in turning the economy around, that success has many fathers. It's only failure doesn't own her. Everybody wants a piece of success. So I think that in your claim, you are joining us, you're not voting with us, to commend the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance. On that note, I wish you all a wonderful, wonderful week. Thank you.
Be it resolved that the Senate...
Yeah. Move the resolution to go past 7?
Well, you've passed 7, or we'll end now.
Okay, Madam President, I'd like to move the resolution that the business of the Senate continue past 7 p.m. so that we can just pass the resolution. Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that the business of the Senate do now proceed beyond 7 p.m. All those in favor would say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The business of the Senate will continue past 7 p.m. Be it resolved that the Senate commends the Minister of Finance, the Honorable K. Peter Turnquest, Deputy Prime Minister, on the mid-year budget communication for the 6-month period ending the 31st December 2017. As many are in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Nay. The ayes have it. The resolution is agreed. We will now proceed to the order of business. Discharge of select committees.
None.
Notices for future meetings.
Madam President, I rise to give notice that the government wishes to renew all government matters on the agenda, and also to give notice that while we have not set the date for and we will be adjourning sine die, the meeting, we're looking to be able to move on the crime bills at our next meeting, and hopefully we can dispose of them in one day, and then thereafter we will move on to other government business after that. Thank you. And we hope to do that sometime late next week.
The chair recognizes Senator the Honorable Fred Mitchell.
Madam President, I wish to renew all notices standing in the name of the opposition members.
Orders for clerk. Adjournment.
Madam President, I beg leave to move that the business of the Senate, that the Senate do adjourn sine die.
Is there a second? It has been moved and seconded that the business of the Senate adjourn sine die. All those in favor would say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The Senate is adjourned sine die.
Madam President, I now move that the Senate do now adjourn.
The Senate stands adjourned sine die.